we could only dream of in the old CK architecture. Now, Crusader Kings 2 was, of course, one of the most successful games we've made at Paradox Development Studio. And a lot of you guys have thrilled us with your stories of noble rulers and sinful tyrants. But we are ready for a new generation of grand strategy games, and we hope that you are too. Come on! Crusader Kings 3 isn't just prettier than CK2, although it is. It is deeper in all the ways that matter. Our primary focus was on the core gameplay mechanics, with particular emphasis on player freedom and player progression. You can tailor your own ruler, your dynasty, and even your religion to cater to your particular playstyle. And if your intransigent vassals will not love you, make them fear you instead! And if that doesn't work, dig up their dirty secrets and blackmail them. That works too. The game also features things like dynastic heads, cadet branches, and so much more that I cannot talk about right now. This worthy heir should be born sometime next year, but game development can be a little bit unpredictable, so no promises. However, I hope that everyone will be playing CK3 before too much time has passed. We also have a little bit of CK2 news to share. As of right now, and forevermore, the base game is free for everyone. This is your best opportunity to get your friends and family interested in Crusader Kings, so please go out and proselytize. We will be sharing more information and details about CK3 very soon. But until then, my friends, have a great PDXCON! Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching the PDXCON 2019 announcement show. Now, the rest of the convention areas will open and are ready for you to explore and enjoy.
뭐야 이거는 무슨 게임이지? 어디서 많이 듣던 노랜데. 아, 유로파다. 이거요. 이거 유로파 방송이요. 아니 뭐 유로파 방송이야. 패러독스 인터랙티브 방송이요. 패러독스 인터랙티브 축제라고 해야 되나? 패덱스콘이라는 이제 뭐 공개하는 뭐 그런 거예요. DLC 같은 거 공개하는 그런 거라고 해야 되는데. 자, 이렇게 해주고. 잠깐만. 이게 잠깐만. 그걸로 하자. 이거는 와, 개오래 걸리는데. 11시 반에 크킹3 공개한다고? 그러면 20분이나 기다려야 되는데 20분? 씨가 시차를 띄워놔야겠다. 잠깐만, 이게 베를린 시간인가? 베를린 시간이겠지? 베를린이 11시 반이니까 베를린 시간이네. 그러면 자, 잠깐만, 베를린 시간을 띄워야 되는데 이거 시간 어떻게 추가할까? 브라우저. 잠깐만. 이거를 잠깐 빼고 이렇게 할까 그러면? 그러니까요. 방송 시작을 안, 그 일정표를 띄워드릴까요? 잠깐만요. 일정표가 여기 있는데 여기서 공개한 일정표가 10시 반에 시작해요. 10시 반에 10시 반에 10시 반에 이제 크킹 3를 공개한다고 하는데 토요일 날이잖아. 베를린이 토요일인가? 베를린이 토요일인데 토요일 날에는 음, 10시 반에 뭐하지? 10시 반까지. 아, 호잉 한판 하자고요? 아니, 이게 한국 시간 10시 반이 아니고 베를린 시간 10시 반이니까 한 20분? 아니다, 이제 한 14분 남았는데. 14분? 14분을 딴 거 하긴 좀 그렇지 않나? 오, 호위부금이다. 호위부금이야. 뉴 DLC 한번 보고 오자고요. 아, 잠깐만요. 일단 제가 지금 이거 하고 있는 것만 하고 보러 갈게요. 잠깐만요. 아이씨. 이거를 잠깐만. 뭐지? 저게 이건가? 이게 안부분이 어디지? 오케이. 아바타 보여주지 말고. 이렇게 해서 호의를 사고 싶은데 돈이 딴 데로 새십니까? 그럴 수 있습니다. 이거 추가를 해주고 위에 200, 300 해주고 속성에서 CSS를 넣어. 야, 이거 원래 안 돼? 왜 안 되지? 좋아, 설정 완료. 브라우저에서 이거를 다 없애고 확인. 됐다. 됐나? 된 거겠지? 음. 됐나? 너무 글씨가 마음에 안 드는데. 잠깐만요. 이거를 100으로 하자. 이렇게 해야지 잘 보일 것 같아. 이거 100% 했는데. 잠깐만. 메시지 백그라운드. 잠깐만, 이거 없애고 다시 만들자. 됐다. 좋아. 예쁜데. 예쁜데, 잠깐만. 예쁜데. 잠깐만, 사이즈를 좀 줄이자. 이게 여기서 바꾸면 안 되는 건가? 확인. 안 되네. 이렇게 다시 하나 추가해야 돼? 오케이. 그러니까 언제 시작하는 걸까요? 빨리 시작했으면 좋겠다. 일정표도 따서 박아 놓을까? 여기에 일정표 따서 박아 놓자. 네, 11시. 지금 호의 신DLC 이름이 라 레지스탕스였나? 아까 봤는데 라 레지스탕스였습니다. 와, 왜 안 해? 10시 반인데. 미친. 빰빰빠라밤빰빠바밤. 언제 하냐? 10시 11시 반 베를린 11시 반인데 안 와? 설마 베를린 시간 아니었어? 베를린 시간 아니었다?
Hello,
왔다.
everyone. Hello.
하이. 왔어.
Hi and welcome, everyone.
왔다.
I hope you've digested the announcements and the news of all the cool stuff. We're going to continue with the rest of the show. For the rest of the day, we're going to have guests appearing on the stage here. I'll be interviewing a couple, and they'll come out and talk about
와,
what
이
they want to talk
지각하는 거
about.
보소.
If I
이런
could ask
중요한
someone in
행사에
the crew to
지각을
help me
하다니.
turn the screen so I can actually see the questions, that would be
아,
great.
맞다. 그
For
일정표
those of
봐야지.
you that are tuning in from home or in your local pub where they're streaming PDXCON, welcome to PDXCON. My name is Shams Georgiani. I'm in charge of business development at Paradox, and I'm here to guide you through a couple of interesting things. So many of you probably noticed that the schedule had a little empty slot for now. Obviously, that was tied to the big announcement, which is Crusader Kings 3.
쿠킹 3 공개. 잠깐만요.
I'm so happy to finally be able to say that and not Project Titus all along, which we've done for the past few years. So, give a warm welcome for our first guest.
Kings 3, a new heir is born. Welcome now to the stage.
여기서 이미지 추가.
The game director of
이미지.
Crusader Kings.
오케이. 여기 있다. 오케이,
Welcome to
나왔어.
the stage, Hendrik. Have a seat.
아,
Have a
해석이요?
seat.
아, 저도 실시간으로 해석이 안 되는데.
Okay.
이미지 보고
Not
해석해야 하는데.
Project Titus anymore,
해석을
but Crusader Kings 3.
이거
It's
어디 놔두지?
we have to train ourselves not to say the actual names for such a long
여기
time.
놔두면 되지.
Well, finally here, and please welcome. Okay, so a lot
아니야.
of people sitting in the audience, especially Ulle here, who's been for 10 years, obviously knows you, right? He's toiled
이거를-
under you, with you.
아, 쓰바.
For the rest of the audience, especially the
이게
people
움직이면 안
tuning in from home, could you give us
Okay.
a brief rundown of who you are and what you've done? Some of the titles you've worked in the past.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I actually started at
여기다
Paradox
놔둘까?
in
뭔가
2001
개, 엄청 걸리적거리는 것 같지
as
않습니까?
a content designer on Europa
여기
Universalis
사이놓고.
2. I was hired because I
보이냐?
made a mod
이렇게
for EU1.
Okay, so you started as a modder.
I started as a modder. I have a programming background,
Okay.
though.
Ah.
So I went from
좋은
content
생각이
design
났어.
to programming to designing games. And after that, I've been doing pretty much everything at Paradox at some point. Project management and game direction. And now I have actually moved on to being manager for the design department.
Okay. Can I ask, so I know in the past game directors have done a lot of coding as well. How much coding do you do nowadays?
I don't do as much coding anymore. On CK2, I did an
아,
extreme amount
뒤에가
of coding,
움직이면 안
game
된다고요.
logic, AI, all that stuff. But for
Okay.
Crusader Kings 3, I've mostly been focusing on
성공적.
giving proper
완벽해.
direction
Okay.
to the team.
Fantastic.
아,
Some of the
킹
titles
3는
that you
지금
worked
별로
on.
궁금하지 않거든요.
Well, I guess the titles I'm most known for would be, the first Hearts of Iron game, Crusader Kings 2, of course, Stellaris.
유로파 유니버셜이랑 12시 반
and now Crusader
유로파
Kings 3,
유니버셜
hopefully.
아닌가?
I
그거랑?
love how he offhandedly mentions Stellaris, like one of
호이는
the
언제 돼?
titles. Like,
와,
okay,
호이는 뭐
fantastic. Okay, so
6시간이
So,
있어요. 호이 DLC를 본
let's
게.
talk a little
아,
bit about
8시간
what
어떻게
took us here.
기다리냐?
I mean, Crusader Kings 2 was released. In itself, it was a sequel of a game that had a lot of promise but didn't really capitalize or deliver on that promise. We did a sequel anyway, and that was released in February 2012, and it's been quite a long while. But why didn't we just continue working on CK2? Why CK3?
저 좀 이따
Well,
방송 틀어놓고
CK2
밥
has
좀
been
먹으러
going on
갈게요.
for over 7 years now. It has a pretty shaky tech base, to be honest.
Well, who did the
이게
coding on
호의는
that?
이게 공개 시간을 보시면 아시겠지만
You know, it's
그 이미지를 보시면
it's not well
아시겠지만
engineered as such, and it's getting difficult to work with.
몇이야 이게?
It's also starting to look a bit dated, and our engine, close to it,
이게-
has moved on from that point. And if anyone has tried
여기
Imperator, you
보시면
know
아시겠지만
what we can do these days.
호의가 이게
Imperator actually
12시가
started
아니고
its
5시?
development after
베를린
Titus did,
시간으로
so
5시거든요.
they borrowed a lot of stuff that we
자 그러면 시간
might
한번
be
보도록
using
하겠습니다.
in
자,
CK3.
몇
Right?
시야 그러면?
Did you ever imagine that Crusader Kings 2 would run this long?
Never, not 7 years. We had plans for 3 years worth of
자,
expansions, maybe.
지금
But then it
11시일
just
때
kept
이제
on rolling and going
6시니까
because people kept buying our stuff
5시면은
and loving the game.
7시간을 더 해야 되니까
And I'm guessing then if
12시.
the original plan was to run for
이제
like
한국
3-4
시간으로
years,
저녁
obviously
12시에
we
공개를
planned for
하는데
3-4 years and thus designed
실화냐?
the architecture and the design of the game and how we built and put stuff together for that kind of year cycle. So
노.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
제가 계산 잘못했네요.
okay, so
12시,
really
5시.
reaching the limitations of what's
12시 반.
possible to do with CK.
I would say so, yeah.
틀어놓고
I
놀러
mean,
갔다 와야겠는데?
now it's held together with glue and hope, mostly. So.
Okay. Good. Okay, let's come to the thing that
틀어놓고 놀러
everyone's
갔다 와야-
interested about, which is Crusader
틀어놓고
Kings
놀러
3.
갔다 와야겠어.
In your words, what is it about? If nobody's heard about Crusader Kings before, what is the game?
Crusader Kings 3 is a medieval ruler simulator. That's what it is, right? You play a medieval ruler and you play out your power fantasies in different ways. So, I mean, it caters to different play styles.
Yeah.
You can be a dynasty builder. You can breed your ideal family of ginger dwarves. Or you can be the militaristic conqueror that you would expect in any grand strategy game, right?
Okay, I understand. So, how do you go about building a game that can cater to that many different player fantasies? Obviously, your player fantasy might differ from mine. I mentioned
아니,
before.
근데,
I
이거
played
저
as an
다른
Italian
DLC에도
duke
좀
who
관심이
was an
많거든요.
idiot and wanted to become the most
요즘 관심 있는
brilliant
게
mind of
킹
Europe.
3도 좀
Is that
관심이
something I can do
있고
in the next game as well?
Of course.
그다음에
CK3
유로파
is an evolution
그리고
of CK2.
시티즌
we
그리고
haven't really
플래넷볼 제가 하는 거거든요.
Gone
그리고
away from anything that makes the game what it is
임페라토르는
and
별로
what makes
관심이
it popular.
없고
Okay.
We have rather tried to cater to more of the
하초바이언이랑
play
스텔라리스
styles that we
거의
have
대부분이
noticed
관심이
that
있기 때문에
players
사이 이렇게
enjoy,
빼고
right? Like the
그래서
breeding
계속
game,
보고 있을
you know,
겁니다. 중간에 밥을 먹으러 가긴 하겠지만
genetics, stuff like that we didn't really do much in CK2. Or the dynastic gameplay. What do you do with your dynasty, right? The dynasty is great because it's something you have throughout the game. And that's not something, you know, there aren't many permanent resources in CK. Countries come and go, your characters keep dying, but you still have your dynasty, right?
So we're talking about new types of mechanics that are tied to bigger flows of time and bigger metagame flows that weren't existing.
I think the game has a much better pacing and flow, and that's why I mentioned progression during the announcement show. It's all about, you know, leveling up, ranking up things, and giving you more and more power in different ways and catering to different playstyles throughout the eras of the game.
Good. I think most people here would agree that at the heart of the Crusader Kings experience, the core that keeps everything rolling is the characters and the character simulation.
Absolutely, yeah.
What changes are being made? What's being done with the character simulation and the character aspect this time around to kind of keep the game going?
Yeah, well, the characters are sort of one of our 3 design pillars. So characters front and center, they should feature in every gameplay mechanic where they
그쯤에 오면 됩니다.
weren't previously
새벽
featured.
5시는 아닌데?
They should look
새벽
great.
5시가 아니라 몇 시야?
And basically, you know, the stories that you can
12시였나? 네,
that
12시인 것
CK is
같아요.
known for, and all the things that drive these emergent stories
킹
should be
3?
in focus of the mechanics, essentially. So one thing, you know, the first thing people will probably notice about Crusader Kings 3 is the 3D portraits. They do look a bit like something you would see in The Sims.
Okay.
They have fully blending skin tones and genetics and noses and whatever. You can have the Habsburg shin being passed on throughout the generations, and inbreeding won't do your characters any good in terms of looks. Right?
So, okay, you mentioned the Habsburg chin. Like, how extreme can these variations become?
Well,
Could you
there
get
are-
my eyebrows in the game?
You could, yeah, of course. You don't have particularly strange eyebrows,
Okay.
but you know. In fact, even if you have the ugly trait, it's going to be reflected in your character portrait. I'm pretty impressed how our artists have managed to work this, right? So they have found
와,
ways of
아까
making
만 명
ugly
있었는데
actually
가운데
ugly
쉰다고
and
유저
beautiful
빠져나간
is
거
beautiful, right?
Okay.
To some
싫합니까?
degree, at least.
So I'm guessing that the game will also, like most Paradox games, have some kind of modding support as well.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's going to be as moddable as ever.
싫합니까?
To some
Even
degree,
more
at
so,
least.
I
would say,
So I'm
because you can more easily mod things like succession laws and stuff like that people asked for in CK2.
Do you know if there's currently a mod that allows people to kind of import their own faces into the games directly? Do you think that it's possible for CK3 because it has a more stronger visual engine?
Right, I'm pretty sure. It's going to be more difficult, right, because our portraits are animated
Sure.
and stuff. I think it's perfectly possible, but it's probably going to take a little bit more skill in 3D modeling and so on. Right.
I'm going to go a little bit off script here, and somebody kill me if I do. But sometimes we allow modders to get into the games before they're released and start making mods. Do you think that that's something you'll consider for this game?
We are looking into that, yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in getting into making mods for CK3 before it's launched, get in touch with our community teams and we can talk about that.
Please do. I really look forward to working with all the modders. So, yeah.
We're going to jump in with an audience question as well that we're taking from Discord, and for Discord or the Twitch chat. So if you have questions, hit them up. Loic on the community team will be lobbying them to me, and then we can kind of hit them. The first question is, how finished will CK3 kind of feel, and will it retain the progress made by CK2 over the years? What's the kind of balance there? Because
Right, well, obviously this is one of the first questions we're going to be asked, right? Because CK2 is an enormous game with all of these expansions. So CK3 will not feature exactly everything from CK2. But my feeling is, in general, that CK2 has, how to put it, some features that are less successful than others, honestly, right?
Yeah.
And a bit less popular than others. So I'm pretty confident that the cuts we've made will not be excessively missed.
okay.
Right? But
So it sounds like accessibility and making it easier for people to get into the game without sacrificing depth has been a focus for this.
no, well, yeah, well, you can say that, right? Accessibility, people talk about that, right?
Yeah.
I would rather
You call
say
it something else, right?
Yeah, I prefer to call it user-friendly or approachable or something like that,
yeah.
right? Because, as you say, we're never going to dump down
No.
our games. That's not going to happen, right?
And that's not what we want to do as a
no.
company. No.
So, making the onboarding easier is, of course, a priority, easier to learn. But in general, I prefer to work with the in-game interfaces and making them more usable, both for new and veteran players, and presenting information in a way that everyone wants or needs. Right? And that is one of the design pillars for the game.
Cool. So let's come back and talk about, is this a grand strategy game or is it an RPG game? Like, how do you draw the line between these?
It's still a grand strategy game, I would say, although I think all of our games are also simulators, right? They're simulation games.
Yeah.
They're nation simulators or political simulators, ruler simulators, so. But Crusader Kings 3 is definitely a grand strategy game. You can still crush your enemies and drive them before you and get that, jolt out of militarily dominating them. So no worries on that account.
I think we talked about this initially when the last game was released, is that I don't know if it's a correct quote, but I heard somewhere that you said that if I had known that people would have played CK like an RPG, I would have made it slightly differently.
Yes.
Yes.
That's true, and that's what we've done. I mean, the new features we have are in some ways reminiscent of what you would find in an RPG, right?
Yeah.
And I know one of the screenshots that we'll be releasing now, I don't know when they'll be going live actually features one of these things, which is a much deeper lifestyle mechanic. In the CK2 expansion, Way of Life, we added a system of lifestyles. You could pick seduction or intrigue or martial lifestyle and so on, warfare. And we went much deeper with this. It's a very role-play thing, but it also caters to character progression. So with the new lifestyle system, basically has role-play, RPG-like skill trees with perks that you can pick up and choose.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, it's RPG in a way, but it also caters to whatever playstyle you favor.
Okay.
Right.
So, talking about play styles and story engines, and you kind of answered this before, but I think it bears repeating. Will we be able to tell different or new types of stories in CK3 that we couldn't before? Or is it different flavors of it, and it's the same stories but in a fresh way?
Yeah, I think we're not carrying over any of the scripted content as such from CK2, or very little of it at least. It's all brand new. I feel that a lot of the CK2 events, well, there are a lot of them, right? But they're all over the place. And the 3 watchwords for the CK3 events is that they should all be relevant, impactful, and immersive. Right? So they are much better crafted. And also, of course, we want to facilitate these emergent stories as much as possible. Right? I would also say that the underlying simulation is much better at showing character behavior, like AI behavior. If they are a rapacious coward or whatever, greedy, irrational, greedy person, that will be reflected in the way they behave and will drive these stories much better.
Good. So you recently had a child. I have a daughter at home. I think both of us kind of freaked out a little bit when we saw the trailer.
Yeah, I mean, I love the trailer. It's so CK. I don't think any other game could do this trailer, to be honest. But it's also extremely uncomfortable right now. I have a 3-month-old baby at home who kind of looks like this child. And it's just, it's uncomfortable, but in a good way, I guess.
Okay, I would have liked to be a fly on the wall when you explained that to your partner about how that trailer came about. So speaking of this darker aspect of CK and simulation games, and you mentioned Sims. I mean, one of the classic things in Sims is, you know, creating a room, locking somebody in there, and closing the door just to see what happens.
Yeah.
We've all done it. Don't pretend you haven't. And what's happening with the dark side stuff in CK? Is that being expanded? What's being done in terms of skullduggery?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going much deeper in character secrets, what they are. You know, if you've murdered someone, you have a secret, even if you get away with it. And you can find out the secret afterwards, and you can blackmail people about it, and basically force them to do your will and have a puppet, right? And it's very useful if you have a secret on your liege, right? He cannot revoke your title because, yeah, you know, things will get out. And there are all kinds of secrets, secret traits. The whole system is brilliant, I think. It's not hugely visible in the interfaces and so on, but it's definitely something you do want to work with if you're into this intrigue type gameplay.
Fantastic. So I know that, you know, as with any Paradox game, and it's the same with the CK when it was released in 2012, we keep developing them for a long time. They're never done, per se. And I know that a lot of the features that we have in the game, we can't necessarily talk about them today because we want to you know, focus some of the highlights in particular in different times. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about today that you would like to highlight to the audience or the viewers at home or in the pubs that you would like to have come across as an important point for Crusader Kings 3?
Yeah, I mean, one of the watchwords is, you know, have it your way, but be challenged, right? So it shouldn't be easy to get your game world to be the way you like, but it's possible, right? So, for example, religions are now completely dynamic. They're made up of, you know, hundreds of doctrines and tenets that can be pieced together any way you like. And this is really what a heresy is. It's a divergent faith, if you will. And you can create these heresies yourself, and that's the way that you will sort of create your own game rules to play with for the rest of the game. And I think that's you know, it's a great system, and it feels great to play with.
We have a couple more questions from Discord. It's totally fine to say no comment on these because we don't want to announce too much stuff and want to trickle it out to you guys because, as always, we don't exactly know how long game development cycles are. Can you say anything about the size of the map? People are wondering if I can play as India right away. India, of course, was not something that was in the base game, it was introducing
틀리긴
Rajas of India, that
번역을 해드리지
expansion.
않으니까 틀리니까
So
좀
we've always
그렇다.
done like expansions that broaden the map.
Yeah.
So what can you say anything about that?
The scope of the map is actually even bigger than in CK2.
Oh wow.
We will cover a little bit more of the east, not China, but eastern Tibet, for example, will be in. We're also going a little bit further south in Sahara, or sub-Saharan Africa. And you can play all of these nations and countries. We're not taking away anything like that. However, we won't feature specific nomadic gameplay. It will be tribal for them. We felt that the nomad system in CK2 wasn't... We eventually got it to work fairly well, but that was one of the things we decided to cut, right? So, but you can still play the Kumans or whatever. They just won't be specifically nomadic.
Okay.
Also, merchant republics will not be in. I might as well be upfront about that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. One final quick question. Glitter Hoof. Happening?
I'll actually leave that to our content designers and not say too much about that right now.
That's a hard yes.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay.
What I can say is the game will not feature a lot of supernatural and weird stuff to begin with, right? It's actually funny because religions can have a view on witchcraft, whether they think it's okay or not,
Okay.
whether it's a crime that you can be arrested for and have your titles revoked. But this is not witchcraft, right? It's perceived witchcraft.
Perceived witchcraft. Okay.
But we will have game rules as in CK2. So if and when we add weird things, you can turn them off.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to stay here, and we're going to bring on another guest that's going to talk a little bit more about the future of CK3
Cool.
with us. Welcome, Chris Carlap. Have a seat.
Hey there.
Chris,
Hey,
welcome.
thanks.
We are happy to tell the world that Crusader Kings 3 will be a launch title on the Xbox Game Pass.
That's right.
So could you
On PC.
Come again?
Xbox Game Pass on PC.
Xbox Game Pass on PC, that's right, because this is a PC game after all. So could you tell us a little bit, because obviously us at Paradox are a little more familiar with it, but it's a newer thing. It's been doing really well, as I understand it. I just saw a picture of Argo flying around Twitter last night with great stats. Could you tell the audience a little bit about what the Game Pass is for the PC?
Yeah, so it's Xbox Game Pass is a membership program subscription that we have that gives players access to more than 100 great games on console. And then at E3 this year, we announced that we're now in PC in beta, so more than 100 games on PC as well. And I think everybody here is going to get a trial to Xbox Game Pass today, so scratch it off, type it in, and if you've got a PC, you'll have access to more than 100 games.
People have PCs, that's for sure.
Yeah, of course. And if you have a console, you'll get access to the games on console as well.
Yeah.
And Crusader Kings 3 is going to be available on Xbox Game Pass on PC day one.
Fantastic.
Exciting, yeah.
That's going to be really exciting. So, obviously, me being on the business side, this is particularly interesting because it ties back to player behavior and how player behavior is changing. We were just talking about, at the Paradox conference that 9 years ago, when people wanted to watch their favorite shows, maybe they weren't going to legal means to kind of get those. But now everyone is watching through streaming, so we see that player behaviors do change. Could you speak anything to the effect of how do you think that the Game Pass is going to enhance and make it easier for people to try games that they haven't done before?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the really cool thing that we see in Game Pass, it's a great curated collection of fantastic games, but the really cool thing is that we see people playing game types that they've never played before. So more than 90% of the people who have Xbox Game Pass have played a game in a genre that they've never played before. And I think with a game like a grand strategy game, Crusaders Kings, it's so appealing when you just see it. But I think for some players it can be intimidating. They don't know if they can really get in there. And then now the fact that they're going to be able to access it as part of Xbox Game Pass, there's no excuse, right? There's no reason not to just jump in and start. And I think once you start to build your dynasty, it's cool. So I think we're going to see a lot of kind of new blood come to the genre, which I think is just great for games.
So it definitely sounds like there's a huge benefit, at least for us as a company, to get a bunch of eyeballs on the game that we wouldn't have otherwise. But what kind of position do you think that Paradox or Crusader Kings specifically will have in the Xbox ecosystem? You guys haven't had traditionally a ton of grand strategy games or these kind of games before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we look at, from our perspective, what we want to have on Game Pass is just a really diverse array of games. And you can't have, a full range of diversity without grand strategy. And so for us, this is going to be, in some ways like a crown jewel in Xbox Game Pass, just to be able to offer this game to players. So super stoked about it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think it's, obviously, we being huge
오, 시계 반짝거리네.
strategy fans, we're huge Age of Empires fans as well. So we look forward to that, hopefully one day being on the Game Pass, and that's something that we can see players trying all the different kind of titles. So what else do we think that people need to know about the Game Pass? Where do they go and get access to the Game Pass?
I think you just go to Xbox Game Pass, type it into your favorite search engine, and...
what is your favorite search engine, Chris?
My favorite search engine is Bing, but I like Google too. But yeah, and everybody's going to get a trial today. I think a 3-month trial, so you can just check it out and get started with it.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So how many titles do you have on the Game Pass for PC right now?
It's more than 100.
Okay. And what's the curation process like? And how do you what's it going to look like in the future in terms of titles being brought on?
For us, as we look at what games to bring into Game Pass, we really just focus on it's got to be super fun. It's got to be, typically that also means they're highly rated. And it's got to be something we think players are going to like and that adds to the mix. We don't want to have just all shooters or, all platformers or something like that. And so we're always just looking, because games go into Game Pass, games come out of Game Pass, we're always just looking to curate a really good mix. So at any time, it's just going to be really fun.
Okay, fantastic. Any closing words about Game Pass that we want to kind of get across? I think it's going to be really fun for people to try it out and see how it works.
The thing to me about Game Pass that's really great is, I remember being a kid and going to the store and renting games. That was the thing in the U.S. And there'd just be this huge variety of games. You could just try anything, and there was kind of no limits. And I think Game Pass kind of gives you back some of that kind of freedom to just try a bunch of things with really no downside, no friction, just the download. And you really do end up finding games that you never would have guessed that you would like, that you completely fall in love with.
Exactly. I think we're seeing more, and at least maybe I'm speaking mostly for myself, but I'm noticing that my gaming is turning more into, it's more matching my music listening habits. What am I in the mood for right now? I want heavy metal, and I then listen to heavy metal. I want something calm, and then go for calm piano. And it's maybe going to be the similar thing when it comes to gaming. If you want a hardcore shooter, you play Gears of War. If you want to be scheming, if you want to live out the power fantasy of, what is it like being Joffrey? Well, you probably have to play Crusader Kings, right?
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. So we're going to wrap that up. Henrik, before we let you leave the stage, Chris, I'm going to ask you to stay. Do you have any major takeaways for Crusader Kings 3 that you want to get across that for those that are tuning in?
Well, I think, it's the third game in the series. The first game was just a cult classic. The second game really took off. And for a long time, I viewed it as the pinnacle of my career, right? But Crusader Kings 3 really is, it's something else. And, I'm so grateful to all of the players who made it happen, through all the feedback they've given on Crusader Kings 3 over 7 years. And I look forward to hear your thoughts on the features in CK3. Please respond to the dev diaries that we'll be posting with, your impressions and suggestions, and follow us on social media. And I look forward to many, many years of CK3 working with you guys in the future.
Fantastic. So I really want to repeat Henrik's words here, is that the whole team is here, and they do want to talk to you and hear your suggestions. It's a huge influencing factor in how we make the games. We have a lot of formal ways of collecting feedback, going through testing, a bunch of stuff. We have the forums, we have the social media accounts and stuff, but do talk to the teams. They're here on the floor, so grab them. They're in the booth there behind you, and then come talk to them. So thank you so much, Henrik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, for those of you that are just tuning in, you're watching the main stage at PDXCON, the annual Paradox convention show. We just had Henrik Fåhraeus on, where we have announced Crusader Kings 3. And we're going to be moving on to our next segment, and that's why I asked you to stay here. So, welcome onto the stage our next guests.
Now on stage, a panel about helping us shape surviving the aftermath. Please welcome our panel guests, Stefan L., Product Manager for Surviving the Aftermath, and Lasse Liljedahl, Game Designer and CEO at Ice Flake Studios.
Hey, Lasse, nice to meet you, man.
How's it going?
Have a seat.
이건 뭐야? 뭐
Have
하는
a seat,
게임이야?
Lasse said close by. I feel like a talk show host.
Surviving the
it feels great.
aftermath.
I wish I was paid like one. Okay, guys, welcome to the stage.
Thanks.
But before I let you talk, I actually have a little bit of announcement. I'm hearing from the control room. Yes, it is live. As you've heard, we're going to do early access for Surviving the Aftermath, right? I'm happy to say that the game is live right
Surviving
now
Mass
on the Epic
없습니다,
Store or through the Xbox Game Preview program.
Surviving
So
Mass.
go search for that. You can try the game. Obviously, we want the people in the audience to stay where you are, but everyone else should be opening up a new tab. That's Control T, and then Googling, and then or Binging, and going for the Surviving the Aftermath and checking that out. It's going to be an early access. There's a ladybug in the corner of the game where you can click on it and send feedback that goes straight to this man's cerebral cortex. So Lasse, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Ice Flake.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Lasse Liljedahl, CEO and Game Director of Ice Flake Studios. And what is Ice Flake? Well, we are a game company located in Tampere, Finland, which is also a place
Tampere.
for Colossal Order that you might know. And we've been around over 12 years now, and we made over 20 games during those years. And the last few years we have concentrated mostly on PC and console projects.
Fantastic, thank you so much. How big is the team?
We are now 21.
Wow, shit, that's big.
지금
You were not
일단
that big when we started. That's
킹
cool.
3랑
So let's move on
이름이
to
뭐였어? Surviving the
game
Aftermath.
itself. This was one of the games, and we got a
두
lot
개
of journalists
있습니다.
asking me like, how did this start? So I'd like to talk a little about
킹
this.
3가
You guys
대박인 것
came to
같고
us with this beautiful idea. So
다른
talk about
하나는
the inception
잘 모르겠어가지고
and starting.
좀 알아봐야 될
How
것
did the
같아요.
idea behind Surviving the Aftermath go? You did a lot of VR ice fishing games, and then suddenly Surviving the Aftermath.
Yes, our latest game before this was an ice fishing game called
지금
Ice
얘기하는 게
Lake.
It's a
이제
really good
그
one, by the way.
Surviving
It was
the Aftermath
like
그거 하고 있고
On many platforms,
아까 그
and
킹
also
3
on
공개했어요.
VR.
Yeah,
No VR plans for Surviving the Aftermath, by the way.
exactly.
And
Haha. Anyone from Oculus here? No? Okay.
And when we were finishing that project, we were thinking that what we should do next. And we had this one idea that had been haunting our minds for a long time, kind of a dream project for us.
Okay.
And we started putting the idea together of that game. And we wanted to make something different with city building and colony management games, which would expand the idea further than other games did at the time. And well, we also wanted it to be more challenging than other games would be. And we ended up with the idea we have here today. And of course, we knew that it was a very ambitious project and we couldn't do it alone. And what we thought that it would be super awesome if we could get Paradox behind us, because of course we knew that Paradox is a well-known publisher of this kind of games, and their company culture is very close to us. So we pitched the idea 2.5 years ago to you, and well, we were terrified what you would say, but as you can see, 2 years later, here we are.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's told you the story, but I can relay it. When we got it initially, it was great. It was great, but I was the one that was the most skeptical.
Oh.
And I told the team, like, we can do this if everything just lines up. But I looked at the team history, I looked at what you guys done, I looked at the Sean, and I was like, this is going to be tough convincing. And what happened was that everyone went back, talked to you guys. We had production, we had marketing, we had Stefan, we had everyone did their legwork and came back, and they're like, we've never seen anything that has gotten this flying colors in the pre-work, in the green light process. So you're number one on that list, for sure. Let's move on to Stefan Alden, where Paradox come into the picture. How come we're publishing this, and how does it fit in the portfolio and the stuff that you're working on?
Well, it really started with, I mean, the time that you approached us, we had already Surviving Mars. We were working with Surviving Mars, and we were thinking, where do we go next? And it's the survival elements, the system mechanics mastery, resource handling, being subjected to all these continuous catastrophes that make life very tough. Apparently, people like getting themselves exposed to that. So we thought, okay, so what can we do after Mars? And when you guys came to us, the idea of doing something that sort of with the post-apocalyptic theme, we thought this fits really good into what we want to do. I mean, you have the main themes from Surviving Mars in this as well. You start with a small number of people, and then you have to make them, get through the day and grow. And so it really felt this is really fitting well into what we want to do with the Surviving brand.
Cool. Before we continue with you, let me jump back to Lasse. Has the concept changed in your eyes radically from whatever the early ideas you had to what you put in the pitch? And it would be great if we could share the pitch at one point, but this is a great pitch. And where it is now, because any game development or software development is iterative, right? It needs to change. It's very silly to write something and then never change it, right? So what have been some of the kind of changes from the original?
Yeah, well, of course it has changed somewhat, but I'm surprised how close it is the original vision we had at the time.
Yeah.
And in gameplay-wise, it's almost the same. The core ideas are still there that it was at the time.
Yeah.
But, well, the biggest difference is the graphics, probably. We had a little bit different idea what it would look like. It was more like cartoony and colorful. Well, it's still colorful and bright and hopeful in that sense, but it's much more realistic than it was at the time.
Okay, cool. Let's come back to that. I think it's an interesting thing. Let's come back to Stefan. How are we approaching Surviving the Aftermath differently compared to Surviving Mars? What are the takeaways there? And maybe kind of segue into why we're doing early access and game preview with Microsoft.
I mean, it's a bit like I said in that well-fitting suit about an hour ago or something on stage. With Surviving Mars, which is a game we're really happy about, and it's really been successful, we felt that we took care and we talked with the community about, what can we do, where we're going to take the game and so on. But when we started thinking about how to do Surviving the Aftermath, we felt that let's try to do things the other way around. It's so much easier to, let's say, integrate any kind of things you want to have in the game. For you guys, it's much easier if we do it early in the process rather than throwing things at you at the 11th hour. Yeah. So we thought, let's do it differently this time around. So let's try to get the community and the players on board while we're making the game. So I would say that's the main difference. We're communicating the same way, I would say, like we've always done. We're very much a community-driven publisher, but this time we thought, let's up it a level, and let us get the players on board immediately and from day one.
Yeah, because we should mention that we're absolutely taking another take on this than we've done in the past. I think we've done early access once or twice in the past.
Yeah,
but we kind of, I wouldn't say we half-assed it. We half-assed it. We didn't fully integrate all the feedback that we got into the process, and that is a big part of it. So, Lasse, how will you be working that? We talked about the ladybug in the corner. Do we have anything we're showing on the feedback loop in the game, maybe on the graphics? But how will we be working with integrating feedback in the game, essentially? What's the cadence? How often will you be putting stuff in the game, and how will we be working with that?
Well, the ladybug works like at all times. You can use it any time when you have something you want to say to us. Just click the button, open the menu, select the category what you want to use, and whether it's a bug, feature, or general suggestion, just send it to us. And everything from there goes to a centralized system that gathers that data, and we can look it from there without going to all other places and trying to scavenge all pieces of information from here and there. And that makes our work much easier, as we have like automated systems that categorize them automatically, and we can get to look at them.
Okay, but can you talk a little bit about that process, quantitative versus qualitative sorting of that? How is that done? Is
Sure.
it a machine learning, or do you have any AI or scripting or parsing?
Only AI we use is to gather the data to the right places. What we do is then look what is the most important, what are the most expected features, what are the biggest features you request, and we check how they align with the plan what we already have ourselves, and try to fit them together as well as possible. And of course, we first take those that are the most biggest concerns, implement those, and then continue to the rest of them.
Do you have a tagging system so people can tag the feedback to specific features or something like that?
Yes, behind the Ladybug you can select the main category and even a specific question that you can choose.
Okay,
there.
So it's not one poor designer sitting in a room and a pneumatic tube has coming shooting bonk an idea right into his head, and he just picks it up and reads and is like, oh, another one.
No, and in addition there's an automated system in the game that triggers certain specific questions that happen certain events after certain events in the game that are very specific, that help us to gather the data along the way.
Since I started talking about pneumatic tubes, I might as well continue off script. Do you have anything set up in the office that will actually ping or give you a counter where you can see physically when the suggestions are coming in?
That might be annoying. At least I hope it
might be annoying. What are you on about?
I hope you give as much feedback that we don't want to listen that beeping all the time.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Cool. So, can you talk a little about the process of how we will take the feedback and turn it into something in the game? So if somebody sends in a really good suggestion and we're like, shit, we need to get that into the game in 2 weeks' time, how does that happen? Or is it 2 weeks' time? What's the turnaround? How does it work?
Well, we have a roadmap that we implement, and we take that feature and put it above others, and then implement it into the game as fast as possible. But of course, we need to do the things that we have already decided at first.
Of course. And so how fast can it go? What's the fastest, Stefan?
If it's sort of something that breaks the game, we'll probably do it immediately. But otherwise, I'd say we integrate things within a month or two.
Okay.
Depending on what it is.
Yeah,
so,
sorry. I would say that it takes a few days to fix critical issues.
Yeah.
Sure.
And longer time, the bigger the feature or the issue.
Okay, let's say that if I'm totally going off now. Because I'm really interested. So what happens if somebody sends in a suggestion, says that, hey, I want to be able to rename my colonists? Okay, I don't know if you have the feature or not.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so here's the suggestion. That's a fairly it was a long time ago I did any development, but how hard can it be, right? Yeah. How hard would it be, or how fast could you turn that around? Is it just a question of resources and priorities, or will you try to get those smaller things in really quickly?
That specific example, that might be very quick, because it's not that hard.
See, that was a promise. It will be a very quick fix. Thank you so much. Okay.
But it still have to be in our roadmap and would be implemented into the paths ahead of us. We want to kind of concentrate all the updates into one bigger path.
This is good. This is why Paradox likes working with Finnish developers. You guys are a blessing to work with. You're so structured and it works so well. And I know that Stefan Fuego over here also likes this structure. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about how often the game will be updated, the different type of cadence. Let's move on to Chris and talk about how this game specifically ties back into the game preview program and how it's set up. How come you guys find this title interesting?
Oh, well,
But let's talk first about the game preview program. Is it different from other early access programs, and how's it set up?
it's pretty similar to a early access on Steam or Epic Store. The big difference on console is that we make sure that players can download and play the game for a little bit of time, I think about an hour before they make that purchase decision, just to make sure they know what they're getting, they know the game's still in development, and so they don't have any questions about what's going on. But it's, it's pretty similar to other early access programs.
Okay.
And the feedback's going to be the same. It's a ladybug, so...
Okay.
Yeah, the feedback is exactly the same on Xbox and on PC.
Okay, fantastic. So it's going to be parity between those.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. So let me ask you, why a game preview program at all? This is not something that Microsoft or Xbox had before.
No, we never had it, and it's never been on console. But players wanted it, developers wanted it, and we spent a long time working out how we were going to do it, and we launched it a few years ago, and it's been super, super popular. Like, players love, developers obviously love to be able to get the game out early, to actually be able to sell the game early, and then really importantly to get that feedback and start to build the community even while the game's still in development. And then for players, we have incredibly sophisticated players. They love games, and to get the opportunity to be able to provide meaningful feedback on a game that they like, and especially a game that's like early in a franchise or new franchise, I think is just a huge opportunity. I know I've been playing the game a little bit, like I've been waiting to click on the ladybug until today, but I have some suggestions now, and I think it's great, and it makes you more. I think it makes you more excited to play because you know that if there are issues, they're going to change, and you're going to have feedback, and it's going to be more your game when it ships.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of games do have a feedback system, but they're largely sometimes obfuscated. And I think you guys are doing a really smart thing to having an active, it's almost going to be an active chat. Can you take a screenshot of the game state and put that into the ladybug?
It doesn't do that currently.
That's a suggestion.
That's a great suggestion that we can look into.
Okay. Chris, do you have any examples of other games that have been in the game preview program that have been really good at doing this, and like best practices you can share with the team or something that the audience can latch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ark is a good example of a game that was in game preview. Subnautica on console was in game preview for a while. And I mean, I think in terms of best practices, you guys are kind of already doing it. The fact that the feedback system is totally integrated, that you don't have to go, off the platform to like a website or something to do the feedback, I think is great. And I think just the planned update cadence, I think is really good too.
Yeah. Can I ask, coming back to the game, we have a gameplay question from the Discord. Will there be generations of survivors, or do you keep getting new survivors, or do they age? What's the system there? And again, you can say no comment if the PR overlords are like looking at you like this and doing this. I don't know.
So colonists will age in our game, and you get new survivors by taking them in through the gate, but they will also born inside the colony slowly, but there will be babies.
Are they born slowly, or they just they grow up slowly? Okay.
And they grow older and...
Okay, fantastic. So, can you speak anything about the scavenging gameplay in general? Like, how's that going to work? Obviously, people here at PDXCON will be able to play the game and try the scavenging mechanics out for themselves. People who go to the Epic Store or the Xbox Game Preview program can try the game in early access right now and see how the scavenging mechanics works. Because obviously, surviving the aftermath is all about scavenging. Can you speak a little bit about those mechanics?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in our game, the idea is that you start with nothing, and you start scraping like the little things you can find around you, and using those to make shelter, get food, get water, and when you have those basics covered, you move to better things. But how we differ from others, we have very extensive resource management system with multiple resources that can be used like in multiple levels. And I think that this is a little bit different than what other games do. And you should see the progress, how you evolve from like a very flimsy shelters to a much improved and sturdy buildings in the later game.
Good. Okay, that's about all the time we have. I just want to say that as a business person, I just love it when a good plan comes together, and that's really what I'm seeing here. I'm super happy with seeing what Xbox has been doing for the past 10 years and coming, from our perspective, so much closer to Paradox in a lot of ways, and PC gaming, and everything is coming together, and it feels like we have a really good team and a cool game, which everything is just converging. I'm really happy to see. So I just want to repeat, everyone, the game is out now in early access on Xbox Game Preview and the Epic Game Store. Check it out. If you're here at the show floor, come look at it. Talk to Lasse, talk to his excellent team, talk to Stefan. Have a great show. We're going to be back in a little bit, and take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you.
Boom. Thanks. Ooh.
중간중간에 쉬는 시간이 너무 많은데 이제 또 12시 반에 유로파 공개하는 건가? 또 9분이나 기다려야 돼? 중간중간에 쉬는 시간이 너무 많다. 이제 유로파 DLC는 봐야죠. 중요합니다. 호이가 제일 궁금하긴 한데 라 뭐지? 라 레지스탕스인가? 호이는 뭐였지? 잠깐만. 호이는 아니 호이가 아니고 유로파는 on alternate history of the game. 저건 DLC가 아닌 것 같은데? 칠 분 남았다. 7분. 유로파 소리다. 유로파 유니버셜 리스 게임 대체 역사? 이게 뭐지? 도대체 뭐지? 쿠킹3를 공개하고 서바이빙 더 애프터마스를 공개하고 유로파 4 could have looked much different than 뭐 유로파에 대해서 대화하는 것 같은데. 오, 이건 뭐야? 아, 패더콘 직접 가시게요? 오, 그 먼 곳을. 좀 나중에 성인 되면 가야 하고. 아니, 성인은 성인인가? 내년부터? 근데 바로는 못 갈 것 같습니다. 대학교 다니면서 가야지. 아, 유로파 소리 좋아. 유로파 브금이 갓브금인 것 같아. 들을 때만 느끼는 거지만. 야, 이번에는 스웨덴에서 안 하고 베를린에서 하지 않았어요? 아니면 독일에서 했던 걸로 기억하는데. 근데 왜 이렇게 많이 빠졌냐? 아까 12,000명 봤는데 지금 4,400명 밖에 안 보네. 한국인 4이나 있었어요? 많이 가는구만. 아무래도 플레이 연령층이 높아서 그런가? 마음만 먹으면 갈 수 있는 분들이 많을 것 같아, 이 게임은. 아, 그렇군요. 알지 애매하면 좀 가기 그렇죠. 내년에 그 킹3 신작 내년에 발표하려나? 아, 좋아. 크킹2 DLC 안 사기 잘했다. 크킹2 DLC 살까 고민하고 있었는데 뭐 그래도 웬만한 DLC는 다 있으니까 슬프네요. 잠깐만, 채팅 시간 좀 늘려볼까? 다 있어요. 대단하시네. 브라우저. 저는 이게 크킹을 안 지가 얼마 안 돼가지고. 좋아. 오케이. 복귀 각입니까? (30분) 빨리 30분 30분에 (12년도부터) 시작해서 저는 한 15년, 16년부터 시작한 것 같은데 2016년. 아니지, 호이4 나오면서 출시하면서 시작했으니까. 호이4를 언제 나왔지? 호이4가 16년에 나왔네. 그러면 저는 2016년부터 했으니까 빅토 빼고 다 했는데, 아니지, 다는 아니구나. 호이, 유로파, 크킹, 그리고 타이탄펄. 시작한다. 개 조용한데 언제 나오지?
Technology, please work. Yes, it
Oh,
works. Hello,
시작한다.
everyone. Again, my name is Shams Georgiani. I'm in charge of business development at Paradox. I'm dropping my stuff left, right, and center. If you're joining us from the interwebs, you're watching PDXCON 2019.
그렇군요.
It's Paradox Interactive's annual convention Bonanza-rama hoopla, where we get to hang out with the fans, talk about the games, and get tons of suggestions on how we're doing things the wrong way and should remove mana from some of our games. As a coincidence, we're right now having one of the biggest sales of the year for the company. If you go to whatever storefront of your preference, you will see huge discounts to all of our, most of our games, if not all of them. So, we have announced a couple of new games. We have announced a bunch of new DLCs. And we've talked to some game directors, new and old. Now it is time to bring up some of the oldest and wisest and grumpiest, perhaps, no, maybe, game directors that we had. I'd like to welcome onto stage Paradox luminary and creative director Johan Andersson. And also welcome game director extraordinaire Martin Anvar. Have a seat, gentlemen. Do you know what we're talking about?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. We are talking about EU4, and more specifically, what could have been, and paths not traveled, and stuff like that. We haven't planned this out a lot because I don't think the three of us need to plan out a conversation. Generally, they tend to happen by themselves. But for people watching at home or in a local pub, please log into Discord and if the ParadoxCon Discord and fill out questions. I will be taking questions for these fine gentlemen. But let's start. Not everyone here knows who you are, and why should they? Please, Johan, tell us who are you and why are you here?
I'm Johan. At one of the first PDXCons, I introduced myself by saying, "Hey, I'm Johan, I'm Paradox." Now, 15 years ago, that might have been true, but...
Yes. Yes, you're 485th of a Paradox, that's correct.
Yes.
But very influential. So
Yeah.
What have you done in the past?
I've been doing a lot of game series. I can be blamed for the Europa Universalis series, some more, perhaps. But
What are you most proud of?
I was asked this question earlier. It's like, I would say... It's hard to tell, but EU4 was probably one of the games I'm most proud of doing.
Okay, moving on. Martin, who are you and what have you done?
All right, so I'm Martin Anvard. I am a game director, although I can't actually talk about what I'm game director of. I came in as AI programmer, and I've been on a bunch of different projects, including EU4. Otherwise, I don't think I would be here talking EU4 memories. And I was also game director of Stellaris for quite a while after the release of the game.
Fantastic. What are you most proud of during your years at Paradox?
I would say I'm absolutely most proud of the work I've done on Stellaris and the expansions we did, especially the way we sort of changed the game 2.0 and all that. So yeah, that is definitely the high point of my career so far.
I would definitely agree. Very good job on Stellaris. Do you have any Stellaris fans here? Great. How about EU fans and EU fans? Slightly more, but and you're in luck because we're going to talk about EU. There you go. Okay, so let's start, Johan. We'd made EU3 and released in 2007.
Yeah.
And then we decided at some point to make EU4. You remember we made EU3 Complete Edition,
Yeah.
and then realized, shit, we need to do more expansions.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from after Complete Edition? Well, Complete Edition 2 was the name we played around with. We used, what was it called in the end?
평점이나 한번 가볼까?
Chronicles.
Yes,
그
that was
스팀에서
what it was called. So,
전부
to
세일하고
talk us
있더라고요.
about
패러독스 게임들.
what could have
이거 페덱스콘 기념으로 하는 것
EU4, where could
같아요.
it have gone at that stage?
못 사신 거 있으신 분들은 가서
because
사시면 되겠습니다.
do you want to maybe describe where we ended up and then talk about where we could have gone in terms of EU?
Well, a lot of people have said through the years that we're dumbing down games and making them more casual and so. EU4 is the only game we've made where the stated ambition was partially make it more the original pitch that I talked, me and Fred worked out together was it should be 25% focus on mechanics and new gameplay, 25% focus on a better UI, 25% better focus on better graphics, and 25% on multiplayer. So that's,
Very clean.
that was the entire vision and plan for the project.
Did you never envision there being another split there, another do it 15% or whatever and put in something else? Did you consider having a fifth there instead of fourths?
There would have been 20% then.
Yeah.
Maths.
My math, let's get in there. But did you consider having a major other thing in there, or was it just did it write itself from the get-go?
Yeah, we thought 25% was a good number, so that's why and there was the 4 areas where we wanted to focus on, because we had a lot of cool ideas for game mechanics, and there was basically 2 great features in the original game. That was like the core thing what we wanted to do for game mechanics. Rework the trade system, which we had the same trade system for EU1, 2, and 3, and in 4 we had with the flows of the trade nodes and so. Chris King designed that one. And of course, the major other thing that I know a lot of people have a certain name for, mana.
Beat sliders, yes.
Yes.
So let's do a quick show of hands. Who prefers sliders? The EU3 sliders. Show of hands. Who prefers mana? And who prefers something else? So and a lot of people don't prefer anything, I think.
Yeah. But in EU4 it worked out.
Yeah. No, but I actually remember that when I first came onto the project, because I came into the project like 9 months or so before release? Started 2013.
I can't remember. I'm an old
It was
guy.
something like that. And I remember just first playing it and being like, yeah, I like the Monarch points. They did a lot to sort of slow your growth to actually make a lot of interesting and balanced decisions. I do think it was a big step forward for the game.
Yeah, it's like it was such a great thing in EU4, and worked perfectly well there. It cannot be moved to other games that easily.
No, it shouldn't necessarily be in every game.
No.
Were there any things that you really wanted in the base version that was released in August of, 2013, that didn't make it in that version?
I think in the original design document for EU4, we wanted to have the random new world. That was one of the things I really wanted. But Thomas Johansson, who was the lead programmer and project lead, he said, please no, we can have it in a later expansion, but this is such a core function that we can't do it. And when we tried it in the first big expansion, it was, I would say, not our best feature ever in an expansion.
Could have used improvement.
Yeah.
Yes. But when you were in charge of the project, you reworked that entire feature.
Yeah, so it was actually kind of it was one thing I always wanted to do, because I always loved the idea of the random new world.
Yeah.
And I didn't think the feature was good enough. And at one point, I sort of ended up with an extra programmer, which doesn't happen that often. And just everything...
How did you manage to get an extra programmer?
Complete happenstance. And that person happened to be really interested in working on a new random new world system. So I managed to sort of do it on the side while we were working on an expansion, and the actual team were working on the other things. So that is basically how it ended up getting reworked. It was one of those things that was always at the back of my head, but we never had the resources for it. Suddenly, I had the resource for it, and it was like, let's do it. The betas made the vast majority of the tiles. I got a bunch of people to help out. I wrote a whole lot of code for actual distribution of countries myself, and it just sort of happened.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think I even made a tile for the system.
Oh yes, you did.
Yes,
you did make
and
a
I'm
tile.
not entirely the best graphic artist in the world. Actually, I'm probably the worst graphic artist in this, even in this group.
Even this group, okay, that's high praise for me.
But you weren't you a level designer once upon a time?
I've done some level design in Magica, actually. It made it into the final game. So let me ask you, once the game was out, did you guys sit down and have discussions about directions the game could take and discarded any directions or said, no, we definitely don't want to do that, and why? Because, I mean, we've expanded the game so many times in so many different ways. It kind of feels like we've covered almost the entire spectrum. But surely there are parts of the spectrum you decided, no, we don't want to go there.
Yeah, we made a conscious decision rather early on that we did not want to add pops. We did not want to add characters.
Why?
Because it's like pops, that's like Vicky, and characters are Crusader Kings. Obviously, Stellaris, Imperator, whatever. But it's like, we didn't want to steal the core functionality from other games and make EU4 into the one and only perfect game.
Yeah. You don't really want too many, like pops, I would say, is something you should build the game around. And you also don't want too many things in a game that you want to build the game around, because you end up with kind of a fuzzy focus of your foundation.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you then, because since I've played quite a bit of both EU at the time it came out and then CK, obviously we have some character mechanics in EU4 as well. So where do you draw, and we've expanded them as I understand with air mechanics and stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Because at some point, you know, CK started really blowing up. It was, I mean, it had a great launch, but it just continued growing like crazy and became this huge phenomenon. Did you consider doing more RPG stuff in EU?
No, this is a super conscious decision. We had a lot of discussions within the game directors at Paradox, and we realized we have a different focus and different feel of how we want to make games. Both me and Martin, we are, I would say, we're system-driven people. We're thinking about balance and mechanics. That's how we.
Yeah.
How we feel. And then it's like you have Henrik Freyes, one of the greatest game designers I've ever met in my entire life. He's a story-driven narrative developer. And that means that if I'm making a game, I should not make a story narrative Crusader Kings style gameplay, because I'm not good at it. And those games are the ones that those type of game directors should be doing. Me and Martin, we have different skill sets and different interests.
I would love to possibly make a story-driven game sometime, but I also think it's super important, the thing I said earlier, where you have to always bear in mind what is your game, what is the heart and soul of your game.
Yeah.
EU4 is very much a game about painting the map. It's a game about conquering, empire building. And whereas CK2 is much more of a game where the heart is the characters, the role-playing, the dynasties.
Yeah.
Stellaris is a game about exploration, you know. Vicky 2, the heart is obviously the pops, the economy. There's just everything has its own place, and if you just try to put everything into the same game, you will end up with a sort of game that does all these things somewhat, but you can never really sense what is the soul of the game, what is the purpose of the game, because it's just trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain this focus within your teams? Because obviously, like, everyone's influenced by different type of things, and even if we like EU, obviously we like CK as well. So how do you maintain that focus and not losing clarity of what the soul and heart of the game is?
We've been working quite a lot on that through the years. You've been one of the driving persons of the term brand identity, and we have now a document that describes what is EU. It's basically, what is a one-pager or something?
Yeah.
What is the pillar? What defines an Europe Universalis game? What defines a Crusader Kings game? And it's the same like the game development pillars that we have at Paradox. I can't recite them, but chums know them by heart.
Yeah.
And it's like, you keep within the pillars of the game you're doing, and as long as you keep within that, you're pretty much free to do what you want.
And it also has the critical part of what isn't it and what you shouldn't you do.
Yeah.
Okay, almost like less is more in a way. Okay.
Yeah, but less is more, but we usually like more is more.
Less is more, but more is also more.
Well, like Yngve Malmsteen says.
Do anyone here remember HOI4? Yeah, some of you. The marketing campaign or whatever I sent was like, it's more.
Yeah. Okay, so any major regrets, or looking back now at EU, like, are there major decisions that you wish you would not have made? Can you be open about those, or you just?
Do you want to do that?
I designed the states.
Okay.
You can boo me now.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think so. That was one of those interesting things where I think we listened a little, or rather me at least, I listened a little too much to certain things that people said they wanted. You know, we want this big focus on peacetime mechanics. We want more decisions, more things to do. And I'm like, well, great. I'll add this system, and you'll have to decide who to assign what land. It'll be important. Except it turns out as I'm at war, I conquer a bunch of things. All my states are whining for provinces, and I can't be bothered. Like, states are interesting if you're playing a small country, before the rework. If you're playing a small country and you can assign specific ones, you're like, oh, my traders in my trade center and so on. But when you Russia with 300 provinces, you just want them to stop complaining, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to get super technical on this, but Henrik just now on stage was talking about the fact that when CK2 was made, they were intending to kind of work with it for 3-4 years and ran into some kind of technical dead ends and also design dead ends. What was the kind of plan for EU? Did you anticipate it running for this many? It's now getting quite, the past 6 years, right?
Yeah, well, I think we had we wanted to make a few expansions, but I mean, EU4 was launched, 1.5 years after CK2. We did not have the CK2 full experience. We knew that we could make a bunch of expansions.
Yeah.
So I think we had written down, after the first one, Conquest of the New
Conquest of Paradise.
Conquest of Paradise was the name. I wrote down 5 or 6 different themes and names. And first we had the Wealth of Nations. We had Art of War focus, and then it was different geographical areas. I pretty much mapped out everything.
I definitely remember that when I became project lead.
Yeah.
Also back then, project lead was different. It was also a designer, sort of manager, lead programmer. It was a lots of hats kind of role. I remember that when I came in and started being in the design meetings more, and we're like, oh, here's this expansion design and that expansion design. And I also remember we would always be talking about make sure we had 3 or 4 expansion designs ready or ready to sort of start finishing up besides the one we were already on.
Yeah, and they were kind of vague the further away they were. It's Dharma, the only thing that existed for Dharma until a few months before starting was it should be India focus. We had nothing else. We just wanted that India focus and Dharma. And neither of us worked on Dharma. That was Jake's baby, but it was that was the agenda. We even have the name and the ideas for the next expansion that we're working on. That was written about 1 year after the release. And it's because we knew what we wanted to do and take the project.
But I think that's fairly general. We had the same approach on Stellaris as well, knowing sort of we want to do these big expansions and sort of in this order, but then things change.
Yeah.
But it is a good approach because you can look at it and you can say, well, we are doing this India expansion in a few years, and that means, or whenever we are doing it, and that means we probably shouldn't be doing this India feature right now.
No, and sometimes stuff come up Art of War is one of the most popular EU4 expansion we made. The map rework was basically something me and Henrik Lomander did during a summer, because it's no, we have to make the map density the same everywhere. So we just kept redrawing the map.
Yeah, I remember that when I would ask people what their favorite feature of Art of War was, and they would answer the map rework. And I would say, that's part of the free patch, right? And they would say, yep, but it's still my favorite feature.
That was funny. And should I be honest about why I wanted that one immediately? It was because I was playing Ming in a multiplayer campaign and got irritated that my wars took so much longer time than the others' wars because it took long to march. And it's like, no, we have to have it standardized. First time in 15 years in EU history that we have the goal that the world should be standardized in size.
So can I ask, we talk about inspiration and other places. What non-Paradox game has influenced you and your work on EU the most, would you say?
Oh.
You can't say World of Warcraft.
No, because it doesn't influence that much. It just influences my soul and makes me happy.
Okay. Well, that's one thing.
Civilization.
Yeah. What? Anything in particular?
No, it's basically that Civilization is the greatest game of all times when it comes to influencing strategy games. I think Civ 2 is still the best, even if Civ 5 was fun.
Yeah.
After the expansions.
Yeah, after the expansion. What about you, Martin?
Oof, that's a really tough question.
It is.
If the non-Paradox game, because, I mean, I did kind of go from Total War games to Paradox games, but I don't know if that's the thing that inspired me the most. I would probably say Civ as well, just like that, but I'm not 100% on that answer.
And I mean, obviously, it's very hard to talk about, none of these games exist in a vacuum. Whenever you play one game, it immediately informs or influences to some degree, even if you can't directly draw a line from a specific feature there to a specific feature there. But the overall advances in how things are done just permeate the design space when we deal with strategy games like this. Can you tell us anything about, as a result of, like, how often do you find yourself going back wishing you would have done something differently? Does that happen? Or are you guys very confident in what you've done over the years?
Oh.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say every day, multiple hours. It's like, when I was going to go out and do the Imperator in the announcement show, I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to go out here and people are going to boo me because Imperator was a failure. I always have a self-doubt about everything, every decision I make. I was like, did I make a good decision? Was this good? Was this bad? Was this great?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, not necessarily the questioning every decision, but you do think about the things you could have done, the decisions you could have made better, and the things you didn't do. Like, especially always just, you want to do this for a game or an expansion or whatever, and you end up doing this. The ambitions are always loftier than what you can actually get done. And that's the sort of thing at least I think about a lot, is what if I had sort of done this differently instead? How would the game looked?
Yeah.
I am generally fairly confident in the decisions I took, but not always.
Yeah, and sometimes you have like a really, really good example of like when a decision was bad, and you're like, I should have done it different, but I can't change the decision now. Like development in EU4, it's like it was an integral part of common sense so we couldn't make it free for a long time because it's like people had been paying for it. And it should have been free because we would have been able to build upon it so much better and would have made the game better. So
same with the States.
Yeah, same there. And I know that you took that approach quite a lot when you worked on Stellaris, that make sure that more things and more mechanics should be free. And that's something I've taken to heart a lot when we've been working on Imperator, that core functionality should be part of the free patch. It makes for better flexibility and better gameplay.
I mean, it sounds like you guys ended up with a game that has had the perfect kind of environment for you to have all these regrets and still be able to go back and actually then explore them and remake it, and over expansions and expansions explore all of these kind of ideas. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but both of you will be here at the show, and please go up to these folks and talk to them. You're both active in social media quite frequently. So feel free to ping them there as well. I can also mention that all our games, especially EU now, are 75% off on most distribution platforms. So it's a great time to try to get into the games and try them. So thank you so much, Johan and Martin, and we'll see you at the rest of PDXCON.
Thank you.
In a little bit, we will convene back here on stage and we will have some more fun stuff for you. See you in a bit.
now the Cities Skylines City Builder episode premiere and inside the episode panel. Please welcome your host, Jonathan Whitley, the community developer for Cities Skylines, and your panelists, Jason Ditmars, Samantha Woods, Kynan Elliott, and Matthias Sivit.
Samantha, Kai, and Matthias. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for that great introduction. So I have here with me 3 of the most incredible city builders that we made an entire video series about them. And Matthias as well from Paradox, who is really the mastermind behind this city builder series. So what we're here today to do is, 1, we have a brand new city builders episode featuring Kai. So we're going to be sharing that with all of you, and then we're going to come back onto the stage and talk a little bit about this series and how we actually filmed all of these. But for now, sit back, enjoy your premium movie content, and enjoy.
I started my YouTube channel 2 years ago, maybe even a little bit over 2 years ago, and sorry, I'm going to burp. I'll start again. Yeah, it was a bit polite. My name's Kynan Elliott, but you probably know me as 2Ls20. I'm an Australian YouTuber, I guess. I've been doing it for about 2 years. I first started off, I don't know, I just wanted to share my cities with people. I think the way that I build cities is probably different in the sense that the whole purpose of my cities are to create a feeling rather than to look purely realistic or to, you know, represent something in real life. I think I go into each project going, what is the story behind this area? What's been the history behind this area? What does this road mean to the whole city? I think creating an atmosphere is on the forefront of my mind every time I build anything. So my mum's an illustrator, so I've always grown up with just drawing and, you know, with art being in the house. And I think I sort of followed in her footsteps by, you know, I was inspired by what she does. I've been drawing, I think it was all pretty much my entire life, really. I picked it back up when I was doing my first big trip overseas, and I was feeling really inspired by the things that I was seeing. When I draw, I tend to draw cities, and I remember I did a drawing that was out of my window of like a street in Redfern, and I changed it completely, but it was still the essence of what it was. And I think that's what I do in City Skylines is I'll create my version of that and try to take the essence of that, but also put my own stories into it. And I think I did the same with my drawings too.
Not like, oh yeah guys, my name's $2.20. Well, I'm a YouTuber from down under, mate.
I have always played city building games. I think that's pretty much the only sort of games I ever play. And as much as I love traveling, I was getting kind of bored. And in me, I really like to make things. I love cities. Like my earliest memories are looking at maps or driving in the car with the family and imagining my own stories for it. When City Skylines released that trailer, I just remember thinking, this is exactly what I want. Like, I want a game where I have a lot of freedom to build the sort of places that I've always dreamt of building. I just remember getting back from 7 months of traveling and just buying a really decent computer to play it, and I think I just closed the door for like a week and a half and just played and played and played, and it was just so great. I started my YouTube channel 2 years ago. When I first started the channel, there was like a standard that I wanted to achieve, and I wasn't going to release a video unless I hit that standard. I had to teach myself Photoshop, how to use Premiere Pro, how to record my voice. Like, I've watched so many tutorials now just on how to basically record the way that I'm recording, and that was really important to me. I still think that my very first video, I still think it holds up. I still think it's probably like one of my best videos. It was like recorded about 3 years ago. But I was really working on my vision for what I wanted my channel to look like and what I wanted my cities to look like, you know, a year before I'd even started. Like, I knew that the cities that I was creating were kind of for other people. I don't think I'd play City Skylines if I didn't have a place where I could share my work like I do. Because, like I said, I build the things that I do so that people can experience it, not so that I can look back and go, oh, this looks pretty, this looks nice. So I think my experience from traveling impacts the way that I create my cities. I mean, I've never really created anything based on Sydney. And I think that's because I have experienced Sydney. Whereas when I travel to another country and experience another city, I just walk around like all the time because when I take it all in, all I want to do is create that. I think Do Not Eat puts it really beautifully when he says that you can't just build a city from scratch, just like here's the main road and here's the downtown, because cities aren't created like that. They start from something really small and they expand as they do. So when you build something in City Skylines, you actually have to take in so much of the backstory of how this road has been there for 100, 200 years. That takes me so long to think about. I probably spend most of my time looking at a blank plot of land than actually building. So I'm currently working on a new series based in China, and I've never put in this amount of preparation for a series like this. And because I really want to do it differently. I wanted to feel more like almost like a TV show rather than me just chipping away at building a city. I started a series based in China because I find Chinese cities so interesting. And Chongqing is like a city that I went to 5 years ago. Like, there's still so much greenery in that city. There's vines climbing up buildings, and there's these like rolling mountains that make this river that is like brown. Yet there are just like the most insane buildings and the most insane bridges. And this monorail system that just connects this whole city up is just so interesting. It is just incredible. But at the same time, I want to create my own city. I'm not going to do a recreation. I'm actually just going to focus on getting the essence of Chinese cities in general and try and put it into one city. Yeah, I never would have dreamt to have an audience like I do and to have essentially a second job. And I love it so much. It is all I think about. I feel like I have a different way of looking at the world because of City Skylines, which is pretty crazy. There's a huge balance between work, life, and my channel. But like I'm so happy. Like this is the happiest I've ever been because I feel like I have so much purpose. There's so much that I want to do, and there's so much where I want my channel to go. It's really something that I'm really quite passionate about. The community for City Skylines is so broad. It's massive, and I think Mr. Mason said it in his City Builders episode where he took a photo of a tree and said, right now I'm playing City Skylines, just walking in the park. It's so true. It's so nice knowing that there's people like that, talented people as well. it's always like, I have no idea how you've done this. City Skylines also open it up to modders and asset creators, which I think that is the most amazing part about the game in general, because what people create inspire me to then create more stuff. And that's unique to City Skylines, I think. And I think it's actually set the standard for a lot of other games like this. I mean, you see the community. People love to see other people's creations. They probably do more than they've ever have. And that's because I think there is such a huge community building things like assets and mods and tutorials so that we all are just supporting each other. And I think we are seeing the most amount of cities being built at the moment with the most amount of passion.
No, this guy.
Give it up for our city builders,
Fucking
and
amazing.
especially for the star, Kai. Thank you so much for being here. You guys have these incredible stories, and that's what we really latched onto. Matthias, when you first came up with this idea, did you realize they had these stories to tell?
I think that first of all, we had a story to tell. You know, when I started at Paradox with City Skylines, I'm mostly a casual player, a casual gamer, so I wasn't really aware of what City Skylines and the community was capable of. And when I started going deeper into the whole community and looking at the work that you guys were doing, I just couldn't understand how this wasn't. How didn't I know about this? Even if I didn't play the game before, how didn't I find out before that this was this craftsmanship going out there, that there was this sort of art form happening, and I thought that, you know, it was unfair, and we need to make sure that everybody knows about this, you know, this attention to detail, this passion and this love that is put into this such an underground sort of movement. And then as you get deeper and deeper into the subject, then you realize how much this community help each other and how these different people on different corners of the world, through collaboration, they create this one big thing, which is this digital urban landscaping, you know, design and art form. And I thought that, you know, I was honored to have the opportunity to be the one who comes up with an idea and push it out there, because I think
Have you guys ever had any of your other video games get described as art or craftsmen or masterpieces?
Or maybe CSGO, but yeah, that was a joke.
But we sit here and we talk about the work that you're doing is, you know, like Matthias said, like these pieces of art, but each of you actually has a reason that you're making this content, and for you, whenever you guys talk about it, it's really just something you have so much passion about. There's always some great reason why you got started, and it's led you to here, where you're at now. This entire series kind of started off with Jason, who's definitely got the backstory there. I mean, give us the little short version of where you came from.
Well, I'm from Los Angeles originally. Now I live here in Berlin. And yeah, I met Matthias at PDXCON 2018 in Stockholm. And maybe you noticed me because I probably got way too into the VR thing you had for Skylines.
But you won the event as well. You won the.
I was going crazy.
You won the competition.
Yeah,
as
there was
well,
a competition.
Right?
I made a city, and so we got to meet. And then a couple months later, I hear from Matthias over the internet, some kind of chat or something, you know, and he pitches this idea. He says something like, you know, we think it's amazing what you're doing, and we want to do some kind of video documentation series where, you know, you're framed as the artists that you really are, you know, and as soon as he said that word, as soon as he said that, I was just like, wow, somebody understands me, finally, you know? And I was like, yes, anything,
Well,
let's do it.
You say we understand, but I keep getting surprised every time one of these videos come out. I thought I knew you. I thought I knew you, and I thought I knew you, because we've been working together for years. And then these videos comes out, and I'm like, I'm just like, you're not crying. But it's like, these are incredible ideas that you guys bring together. I mean, and I know we're just showering on the compliments, but we can't say it enough that each one of you, you are an artist and you bring something so great to this community.
But we're only like one small portion. I mean, we're lucky enough to have videos being made, like people fly to our countries to take these films of us, but honestly, like the entire community is like this. Like everyone has like such a unique story. Everyone's playing the game in like a really different way. Like these guys are playing in such a different style than I am. Like I have no idea about asset creation, but that's how they play. It's really insane.
So we have pretty dedicated YouTuber. We have an asset creator from Sam, and then we have Jason, who is now doing everything. But
back and forth.
But everyone has a different background, and this is why I really like the story that we have for you, Kai. Is you've really laid it out there so eloquently that this community builds on each other. That you each inspire each other, and that is something that I love that Matthias, that you were able to find, that this is a well woven together community, and that's amazing for us. But
she was my mentor, you know. When I met Ivania through a forum or something, I had questions, and she was the first to help. You know, just there to answer the questions for no reason at all except to help. And, you know, I was like, oh, here's a helpful person. Then, you know, more questions and more questions.
It's funny. I had the same experience when I started. You know, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't make 3D models until I started with City Skylines. And I was like, there's a guide. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And everyone was so helpful and, like, sharing their experience or, like, resources and just, like, try this or try that. And that just really helped me, like, not only just learn, but, like, get better.
Yeah, and I think that's the great part about this community, that honestly, we've all built together, and we can't thank you enough for everything you've done to help us. But this community isn't made up of pro gamers or professionals. It's made up of individuals who are just passionate about things. Sam, I mean, really quick, what would be the thing that you would want to say to anyone out there who might be a little intimidated because you have some of the most popular assets on Steam Workshop? How can they get started without, you know, started doing their own thing?
Just like, give it a try. Like, you will find out, like, what your style is, or like what you're passionate about, and like pick something that interests you, something that you feel is missing, and go for that, and just ask. Like, there is so much help to get out there, so many resources that has been built up by the community now.
Definitely. So I think it gets intimidating watching Jason play, because he's basically made Berlin all in one city, and he continues adding more and more to it. Is this the never-ending project?
Yeah, it's never-ending. You know, I want to have the Funkhaus in my build. You know, nobody's made the Funkhaus yet. Will one of you please make this thing? I want to plop it. You know, that's like a lot of my experience with the game is just walking through Berlin saying, you know, I don't have that. I want that. If it's not in the game, we got to make it. You know, it's like and you were talking about, like, why do we do this thing? That's a really hard question to answer, actually. And for me, all I can say is that I make things that I want to see. You know, like, why do you do that? Well, because I want to see it. I want to have it. I want to do it. You know, that's the only answer I can give. It's just, you know.
Yeah, like, I have this cycle where I'll make something and then I'll play and I'll work on my city, and then I'll have a spot and, like, I need this in the game, and then I'll be, well, out of the game into Blender, and then start making it.
It's such a weird. But I have the same thing, but it's like, if I walk somewhere, so if that Chinese city that I walked in, I'm like, I want to do this, but I'm not going to, like, what am I going to do it in? Like, it's a city, it's already existing. Why do I want to do that? But I just, for some reason, I want to build it.
And I think you've really latched onto something too, Kai, because when we were first talking to you about the city builders, you said something that you don't want to show people how a city was built. You want to show people how a city like grew and had a history and came to be. You wanted to tell the story behind a city.
Yeah, so my first city that I ever did and the first series that I ever did was like I probably spent like 7 months just building it. Like all this footage, all this time I could have been recording like me doing the road layouts and plopping down houses, but I really wanted the final city built before people saw it. And it was really weird. It was like a really weird way of doing it. And I got a lot of criticism, like people saying, look, where's all that? Why didn't you do any tutorials? Or why, like, I want to see you build these parts. I was like, oh, they don't exist. I wanted you to experience what the city is right now.
I feel that, because as I said, I see it as an art form, but I think that the reason why it hasn't exploded massively worldwide as an art form, perhaps, one of the reasons is because you can't really frame it. You can't say that what you can do with this is, you know, to make amazing, you know, photographs of cities that are made digitally and you can put it on a frame, because then you're underselling it, because you tell stories about it. And then we have this other guy that makes, you know, history lessons with it. They're fantastic. We filmed them as well in Philadelphia. And each one uses this platform to create different kinds of art forms that are very, very difficult to encapsulate. So how do you display all this? You can't really frame it somewhere.
You've made a great start, and I have to say, while we're here, thank you so much for doing this series.
Oh, my
I think
pleasure.
it's so cool, and I think it's wonderful that Paradox supported it and that you guys are making this, and I would love to see more stuff like this. Like each premiere episode, I can't wait to see them, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
gobbling them up. I love
We
it.
hope they're doing
Thank you.
good. So Matthias actually got our first 4 videos filmed, and then we've had some another crew from the Paradox team go out to film Sam and Kai. Really quick, because I realize we're already running short on time, but let's just tell your favorite story about. Tell us really quick what it was like filming. Let's start with Kai, because his was the most recent.
Well, it's pretty funny because Billy was messaging me. He was one of the guys that filmed it. And he was saying, get the room set up so we can do an interview. So I cleaned my studio really well, but it's really small. So it was the cleanest it's ever been. And then when they got there, dude, this is way too small. We can't film in here. So we had to go into the living room. And Strictosa saw the video, the teaser before I got to see it. And he was like, dude, do you live in a mansion or something? I'm like, no, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney. It's tiny. But the way that they positioned the camera and they put lamps in places and the couch was moved and everything was in such a weird position, but it just works so beautifully. So it's really interesting to see a lot behind the scenes when it comes to making these things.
And Sam?
Well, for me, it must be that we got into some areas of the harbor that I have not been in years. We got into the container harbor and showed them around, and they were just especially Robin got caught up in all the colors of the containers and was loving it, and it was just such an interesting thing to see that perspective on it, because I drive by them every day and they're just there, and I wanted them in the game for that, but.
I heard you got them all the behind-the-scenes passes into all the dangerous industrial areas. They had to put on their hard helmets.
It was Saturday, so there wasn't really a whole lot of people working in the harbor. Yeah, we got into the closed-off parts of the industrial harbor because my dad works there, and we also got past. There's a Shell terminal for ships, which you can oversee. So we got some nice looks for industrial areas.
Awesome. And Jason, I know you got 1,000 stories to tell, but can you tell them really quick the story of almost getting kicked out by security?
Yeah, sure. That was really fun. We did the interview in my apartment, and then we walked in the neighborhood, and I had made a sunken stadium called Jan Sport Park. If you're from Berlin, you might know it. It's in Prenzlauer Berg. And like the Funkhaus that used to be the radio broadcasting station for East Germany, Jan Sport Park was like the national stadium for the football team. So for those 30 years, the national team would play there. So I wanted to show it to them, but usually you can't get into it because there's an event or something, the security gates are closed. But thankfully, some event, it was like the serendipitous moment. Some event had just ended, and there were like a couple like kids in soccer gear just walking out, and then I was like, come on, Billy, and Matthias, and they were coming out, and we went in, and we walked onto the field completely. It was just us. The entire stadium was empty. You walked through a tunnel and onto the field, and it was just like, it was so great. And that moment lasted for like 30 seconds, and then some security guards shouted at us from up above, "What are you doing here? Get out of here!" And I was like, "Okay, sorry, Entschuldigung, ja, wir gehen sofort, Entschuldigung, sorry.
Right, we got the shot.
We got the shot. I was like, "Did you get it? Did you get it?"
And I mean, we got to say thanks again to Matthias for helping put this together.
Anytime.
We have Billy and Robin and Jenny and the whole Paradox team helps put these together, but really it's thanks to you. Right now at PDXCON, we have 42 creators from the City Skylines community who each have their own story, their incredible cities, the assets they've made, and the passion is incredible. And it's from all around the world. People from Australia and Japan, from all corners of the US and Canada, all over Europe. We have a global community, and we are so proud of all of you and that you're all able to come. So can we give a big round of applause to these amazing creators?
They're all right there.
Yeah. And it's time for us to wrap up, but I want to give a quick let you all know here at the convention that the City Skylines booth up on our second floor has their cities actually loaded up on the computers. So if you want to see the cities they've created, please come join us and talk to us up there. And we're also showing all 8 city builders in a video format up in our booth. So we look forward to talking with you. Have a great PDXCon, everyone.
Thank you.
PDXCon, people.
보자. 밥 먹고 왔는데 이제 베를린 시간이 12시 40분이란 말이죠. 12시 40분. 12시 40분? 12시 40분이라고? 그러면 이제 시티즈 스카이라인 이거에 뭔가 잘못된 것 같은데? 그러면은 12시 40분이니까 1시에 시티즈 스카이라인 하나? 이거 시간 맞아? 잠깐만. 아니지. 새로운 질문을 쳐야 되네. 1시 30분이구나. 그러면 시티즈 스카이라인 끝났고 이제 그거 하겠네. 1시 30분에 하는 거. 월 스토리스 하겠네요. 월 스토리스. 이제 빠빠빠빠빠라바바. 이게 몇 시부터 봐야 되지? 2시간 30분째 스트리밍 하고 있는데 이제 볼만한 게 사이에 플래닛 폴이랑 그 뒤로 없어. 5시 30분까지 먹여야 돼. 그러면 12시 반까지 볼 게 없어. 12시 반에 호이복 6시, 11시, 1시에 스텔라이스 보나? 아니지, 잠깐만. 5시 반이면 7시간 더 하면 6시, 7시, 8시, 9시, 10시, 11시, 12시, 12시 반 맞네. 한 30분 지났는데 왜 안 와요? 1시 반 지났는데. 한 시 반 지났는데 왜 안 하니? 이거 뭐야? 이 이름이 갑자기 기억이 안 나네. 이거 유로파 부금인가? 패널 월 스토리스를 하겠네요. 조금 있으면. 잠깐만. 어허, 좋아 좋아. 뭐지? 쉬는 시간인가? 빠라바라바 12시 반까지 뭐해? 아니 근데 티저는 나왔거든요. 오늘 하는 거는 이제 뭐 개발자의 회의, 뭐 그런 개발자 대화 같은 건데 거기서 이제 좀 정보를 풀어주겠죠. 그래서 보고 있는 건데 이 티저 영상이나 한번 볼까? 심심한데.
Hello again, everyone. Hello, beautiful fans. And I see we have some people from the banking sector here as well. You're also welcome as long as you play our games. So, hi everyone, my name is Shams Georgiani. I'm in charge of business development at Paradox Interactive. I'm also hosting some of the panels here on stage. If you're tuning in for the first time on Twitch or some other streaming service, this is the annual Paradox Convention, where we gather around with our fans, our players, and the developers, and we announce new stuff and we play games. This event also coincides with a huge sale that's going on, so if you want to dip your toes in the Paradox game and then have a lifelong addiction, this is a great opportunity. So now, I have the honor of hosting probably one of the most anticipated things for me at least at this show, and that's hosting a panel about war stories from a number of veterans from the games industry. So I would like to welcome a number of people up on stage.
또 시작하는 건가?
Gentleman, founder and creative director at Hairbrain Schemes. Rod Humble, designer and founder of Tectonic, and Brendan Romero, CEO and designer at Romero Games. And Thomas Johansson, studio manager at PDS. Come on board, guys. Have a seat.
Hi. Hi. I can't remember where I'm supposed to be, so.
So squeeze in, everyone. Hi and welcome. This is one of the
Panel.
I've been looking forward to
War
this
stories.
because whenever we talk, whether I want it or not, you tell me war stories. And war stories aren't worth that much if you can't draw any learnings from them. So hopefully today we'll be talking about war stories. But briefly, before we jump in, could you just quickly run through some of the highlights of your careers, what games you've kind of shipped or worked on, or games that have gone up in beautiful flames at some point? Thomas, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I started at Paradox in 2004. I think the company at that point was like, I don't know, 13 people, including finance and CEO and stuff like that. And I was a junior programmer. I think my first job task was to do tooltip bugs in Hearts of Iron 2. And then from that point we started making an engine. We make a game called Diplomacy that perhaps we shouldn't talk about.
Anyone played Diplomacy here? Oh, you poor people.
The board game, I hope.
It ends friendships.
Yeah, exactly, it does.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, I worked on a couple of games like EU3 and these kind of games that after a while I became the lead programmer. And then I got the task to start working on EU4. And we had a small team and we kind of ran this game from start to finish. And I think that's the game achievement I'm most proud with. It's a game I still love to play and enjoy. And then I started to move more into management and production. So now I'm the studio manager. And I think in my job, it's like I learn things about people and I learn things about myself. And I have to grow as a person. And that to me gives me the most satisfaction in that job.
Cool, thank you. Rod?
I've been in the business since 1989. It's about 30 years. And I've shipped and worked on a little over 200 games now. And I've done various roles, design, programming, CEO, and general manager. Some of the games I've made entirely by myself, and some games I've been head of the studio. I'm probably best known for the bigger franchises I've worked on. So I headed up the EverQuest studio for several years. Then I headed up the Sims division, Electronic Arts, for several years. And for PC gamers, I worked on Subspace, which is this like massive multiplayer game. Yeah, I've worked on a bunch of games. So.
I feel honored. Hi, I'm Mitch. I started in paper and pencil role-playing games in '93. So I ghost wrote some. Back in the '90s, everybody would get contracts to write role-playing games and then make their friends write it for them. So I did a lot of ghost writing there. I worked on a game called Underground, though. It was the RPG for me. And then I went to work for Sony, designing a PlayStation 1 first wave title. That was my first game. That was in '94, '95. Then after that, I started working on these hideous Sillywood games, you know, like back when CD-ROMs, or was it DVD? When DVD was first invented and everybody was live action, like, you know, that kind of crap. So I did some of that stuff and did Where's Waldo Teaches History. And then I started working on Crimson Skies with Jordan Weissman and was co-creator of that with him. And then the Mech Commander series, blah, blah, blah. We got bought by Microsoft. I became the head of Fastest Studio at Microsoft, worked on infamous Shadowrun first-person shooter, delightful story. That's not the war story we're going to talk about today. Then I went on to run Xbox Live Arcade, if anybody has ever heard of that. During the summer of arcade, that was my summer. And then I went indie and created Harebrained Schemes. And I think the thing that we're probably best known for is the Shadowrun RPG series and now Battletech.
Yeah. I'm Brenda Romero. Hi. I got into the industry in 1981, so I was 15. It's all I've never had a real job. Yay.
That's awesome.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you do for a living? I make games. I play games. So I've worked on everything from the Wizardry series to Dungeons and Dragons to Def Jam to Playboy. Weirdly enough, there's some weird stories there, not surprisingly. and now working on Empire of Sin. So gosh, I feel like I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked on every platform, I think, from the Apple II to the iPhone. I've worked on tabletop games as well. I have a series of games that are sort of documentary games about dark moments in human history, and I make just one of them, and they have things like 50,000 pieces. Don't ever make a game with 50,000 individually hand-painted pieces. It's
Noted.
Not a good idea, but super fascinating. So anyway, that's me. That's what I do.
Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. So as you can see, a lot of war stories to be shared, but we won't be sharing all of them. I think I've asked you guys to kind of prepare one each. Who would like to go first? Anyone kind of really excited to kind of share a story? Rod, you go first.
I can go for when I was running the EverQuest studio. We were #1, and it was great, and it was wonderful. And we were working on EverQuest 2 secretly, and then Blizzard announced that they were going to be making an MMO. So as the guy who's running the business, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. So I've had experience with being in the crosshairs of Blizzard. Actually, Rob Pardo came down to our studio, and he was super nice. And he was like, look, you know, we've been through this before. And it's a lot easier if we just show up and we just chat about, look, we're really not here to destroy your business. Really, all we want is to bring our players to the MMO space. You know, we're not actually trying to destroy EverQuest, which was nice of him. We had some good chats. But then, you know, obviously, we get into the business of competing, which is what you do. We try to make players happy. With EverQuest 2, we were 6 months out from ship. Game was looking beautiful. You know, it was really nice. World of Warcraft was in their alpha. Their friends and family beta. And with EverQuest 2, we all of a sudden realized we didn't have doors working properly yet. And EverQuest 1 had doors. You can click on a door, go into the room. And we're like, oh, what the hell are we going to do? Like, we can't ship without doors. Like, I mean, an idiot would do that. So we delay months and months and months getting these doors in. We also added voiceover stuff. And it really, really cost us like a large amount of development time. World of Warcraft comes out, no doors. So they're like, who cares? Like, nobody goes down about doors. Like, and of course, they succeeded. So my lesson from that is maybe focus on the gameplay, you know, like rather than worrying about doors and aesthetic things and realism, you know.
But, so how come you ended up obsessing so much about doors?
Because we believed when you're running a big franchise, you're inside the church, and you start to believe that you know how you became successful, and you tell yourself this story, you know, of like, oh, camping is good because it encourages people to get together. That's what people want, is camping. You're like, nobody wanted camping. You know, like, we told ourselves that people loved it as a social time, and so what a good competitor can do is there's a famous Japanese designer who I can't share his name because it's confidential. He came to Electronic Arts, and he just gave us game designers one bit of wisdom, and he said, it's much better to attack the castle than defend the castle. And that summarized it, is you've got this better perspective. You can look all around at all the weaknesses. You can see what this castle is made of. Whereas when you're inside, you're like, oh, sure, those walls are cool. Like, we know exactly how we're safe. So.
Well, you're also in an echo chamber. That happens too, right?
Yeah.
Everybody tells you, yeah, doors. Yeah, oh, yeah, doors.
Yeah,
totally. We got to have doors.
Yeah. And of course, you know, when you're looking at a feature set, obviously, marketing and sales have usually got a list of features. And if we were to say, oh, we're cutting doors, you know, all of a sudden it's like, what, are you mad? Like, you know, how stupid is the world going to look without doors? It looks like World of Warcraft. It looks just fine, actually, but we didn't know that at the time. So
it sounds like it had to do partially with having a culture where maybe you couldn't challenge some preconceptions.
Oh, I wouldn't blame the culture. I'd blame myself.
Okay.
I was definitely the idiot here.
So were other people challenging the doors and you were like, no, we need doors?
No, nobody challenged it. But I was like, sure, we need to do doors. Obviously, we're not idiots. You know? Yeah.
Because I think at least, speaking of Paradox, we having made more or less different variants of the same game, if you want to really boil it down, the grand strategy games, for many years, we kind of sometimes, when you look at Europa Universalis 1 and look at what we're doing in CK3, there are still a lot of similarities. And in some cases, they're very strong laurels to kind of rest on and solid design, like don't throw it out. Why would you? And in some cases, we're still using, 1990s established practices for conveying some type of information.
Yeah.
And how you build a studio and over time challenge the conceptions that have been around for a very long time.
That was the other part of the war story is, you said 1990s design. We had, again, convinced ourselves that people enjoyed looking for quests in the text bar and walking up to an NPC and saying, oh, can I say the right thing to unlock this quest? And Blizzard comes along and they're like, nah, just stick a exclamation point above the head, and there you go. Now you know there's a quest there.
Exactly.
Again, it was a lesson. But.
So this is something, at least, I think we see also in the auto industry, when now there's a shift going over to electric cars. I know that BMW, any BMW fans here? When they created one of their first electric cars, it still had a petrol port that went to nothing. And maybe because of they just reused the chassis from the other cars, but it kind of spoke volumes about the mindset. They didn't start building a new car from scratch that was electrical. Right. They took something else and retrofitted it instead of saying, we don't need doors, essentially. And there's a parallel there, maybe. Okay. Thomas, do you have a war story for us?
Yeah, I want to talk about a game that I didn't actually work on that much, Crusader Kings 2. So around the release of Crusader Kings 2, I've just been on parental leave for 6 months, as you do. So I was coming back, and my job at the time was to I used to be programmer mostly, but then I was going to boot up the EU4 project, and I was starting looking at the old code and the design and everything, trying to get it together. And then the studio manager and the creative director pulls me into a room and sort of like, Thomas, you've been working here a long time, and it's like, I'm going to have a baby soon. And then, somebody needs to run the studio in my absence. I'm just going to be away a couple of days, don't worry about it. And we're going to release the game and it's a month away. But you never know with these things, right? So you just be prepared. And I was like, yeah, sure. Back to you for. And then we were going to release Crusader Kings 2 on the Tuesday. And I get an email on the Sunday at 3 a.m. It was a very short email. I still have it. It said, the doctors have decided to deliver the baby, and they're doing it now. I am not coming in tomorrow. Don't tell anyone. And I was like, okay. And funnily enough, or interesting enough, the first thing that came to mind wasn't sort of like, oh shit, how we're going to make it? Because my own daughter had arrived a few years earlier, also with an emergency C-section, so I could kind of picture where he was at that moment, right? Sitting there in the waiting room with his phone, like, sending an email. And I was like, okay. But the thing was that, the game had really progressed. I mean, we had worked the game was basically done after 11 months. And then we spent like 6 months to polish and everything. The team was really stable. Henrik and the guys, they were like working really well. So, I mean, that release was really good. It went really well. And to me, it kind of, the whole experience, first of all, was really transformative experience for me because I stood on my own and I felt that, hey, this worked. But also it kind of shows you what, if you have stable teams and independent team members and you rely on your people to know what you're doing, you can still be in a situation where like the most senior person who founded the studio, the manager of the studio, can just disappear days before a major game release, and we're fine. And then it ended up he was gone for like 6 weeks instead of 2 days. But we were doing fine, and I think it also for me it also sent me a message about this. We sometimes say that games are important, but family come first. And when you have a senior person like that really doing that, it kind of sends a powerful message that we actually mean it.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting time for me.
Any comments? Does this resonate?
I had twins and I had one singleton, and I planned both of my pregnancies around the shipping of a game.
Wow.
However, I know, guess what?
Wait, where did that show on the Gantt chart?
Well, yeah. So what was interesting is babies babies ship on time.
Oh, yeah. Mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in both cases, I was still shipping a game after I'd shipped babies.
Yeah.
So
There's no
you know-
discussion about like, I think Q1 looks better. Let's wait until Q1.
Well, I actually left like 6 extra months, and I even carried the twins to term, so there was no excuse. You know, I guess the lesson is don't plan to have twins and be a lead game designer, maybe, or leave that in the schedule. But it was the same sort of thing happened.
Yeah.
You know, like the game didn't. You know, everything was fine. You have a good team. I think the only weird thing that happened, which is in itself like a mini war story, is while I was at a doctor appointment, a group of people at the company decided how they would handle it if I gave birth early. And I let them know, like, it's pregnancy. I'm not expected to die. Like, most people survive pregnancy. It'll be okay.
So, so they had an emergency plan in case.
Which I probably should have been involved in. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's considerate of them. I say. It's okay. Cool. Mitch, do you have a story to share with us?
It's just a war story?
Generally,
yeah,
I
I've
know we
been
have a
juggling
number.
them in my head to try and figure out just how deep to go. You know,
don't go all the way.
Yeah, because I've gotten kicked between the legs many, many times in this industry. Not literally,
Oh,
although
that would be a good. That would
actually, actually, I have got, that did happen. I think
타이탄 폴까지만
on
보고 아니 타이탄 폴이 아니고
really hard
플래닛
story. I just
폴까지만
decided
보고
screw it to tell it
걷다가
was I was working on this game at Microsoft.
좀
It was a
이따가
AAA team.
호의하기 좀 전에 키는 게 나을 것
over 100
같은데
people on the team at the
일단
time, which
보고
was very large at the
정하도록
time.
하겠습니다.
And there was a major schism between the art team and the rest of the studio, between the artists, the designers, and the engineers, especially. And the art director and the lead designer were really at loggerheads, and they were misbehaving, etc. And the art director came to me one day, and he said, "Look, this is it. Play me or trade me. That's it." I'm like, "All right, you're out," because I'm not going to take an ultimatum from somebody. At least that's what I thought at the time. And so, like, yeah, you're out today. That's it. Pack your bags. And then I told HR what I did. That was awesome. Different conversation with vice presidents. But, whoops. But then what happened was most of the art team were loyalists, and they started to bleed out. And we'd have a studio meeting once a week, right, every Friday. And every Friday for about, and I'm not exaggerating this, 10 Fridays, I was announcing who was leaving the studio that week, right? And I lost 10 artists, and everybody in the studio is like, "Well, we're dead, we're dead, we're dead. We're bleeding out, we're bleeding out." And it became this panic thing. I was just like, "No, we're not. No, we're not. We're not. We're going to hire new people." And the first thing I did was find an art director right away who happened to be very good at recruiting. And then we just went on a recruiting tear. And it was all about recruiting the right people. And this is where I really learned hiring skills, real interviewing skills, real putting together the right human algebra of a video game team. And we hired the whole team back, plus some more. Super quality people that really understood how to collaborate, how to connect with each other, how to work together from a goal-oriented point of view, how to remove silos between different teams within a team. And we gelled that thing, and then the studio was closed. But, and by the way, and this is, talk about horror stories, or what is this called, war stories? Here's your, I want to use profanity so bad here, but a year before we shipped our game, the vice president of Microsoft takes me aside and says, "In a year, we're going to close your studio."
He texted you and said this.
So he really trusted me with that information. Okay. And so I have to walk around for a year, right, while I'm rebuilding this team, looking at dead men walking, right? And like, how do I motivate these people to do their best work? And I just decided, you know what? I got an idea. I'm compartmentalizing this thing completely, and I stuffed it down the memory hole as hard as I could.
Well, sorry, Mitch, where do you keep your memory hole? It's right
down there by my belly
Please
button.
continue, sorry.
By my gut. So that hurt. But anyway, I think the real lesson there that I took away from it is no one is irreplaceable. No one on your team. Because a lot of times you can feel held hostage by a team member. You've got this super talented team member, right? And you think, there's no way I could finish this game without that person. And that's just a lie. That's an absolute lie. Anyone can be replaced. Anybody. And then, of course, tenacity. A lot of tenacity.
So can I ask you, was it during that hiring spree where you picked up your, what is now, to me, a classic Mitch Gittleman hiring question?
Oh, so...
I think you should share it with it's a nice tangent.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to interview some of you, and I'm going to blow it if I tell you. But yeah, so what happens is the last question, I'm the last interviewer in the studio, right? And then my last question in your last interview is, the way I set it up is, hiring's very hard. Interviewing is, it's sort of a skill, sort of a talent, sort of an art, and it's never foolproof, right? You never know what you're going to get. And about 3 months after you hire anybody, right, you find out things about them that you wish you had figured out during the interview if you had asked the right question. So what are we going to learn about you in 3 months that you could just tell me right now and be proactive? And the answers that you get to that question are fascinating and revealing. And once you've had a chance to, over the course of an hour, really get to know somebody, the answer, if you're really meeting them where they are open-heartedly, and they'll tell you what you need to know to help make the right hiring decision. It works for me nearly every time. Been lucky.
I think it's a great story. I always use that question. Really? Ever since you told me that story, that's my final question in every interview I've had since.
You just made my entire day. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I want to know, do you guys, as a small tangent, do you guys have a go-to question that you ask during interviews? Because I need more tips. Because if I have 3 more of these good questions, I can just throw away all my other questions, just use yours.
We had a bunch of questions in PDS for a long while. We have kind of stopped doing them. I know Johan thinks we could continue.
Are they illegal?
No, but they're not they were really good, but a bit sort of we had the A and B questions. So we like to, during the interview, either towards the end, or if the person is really nervous, you try to do it in the middle because it kind of breaks the ice. So we ask them sort of here's the A and B questions. You answer really fast. It's Star Trek or Star Wars.
Star Trek.
And it's Horde or Alliance, football or hockey. And then comes, but there is only really one question that has a good right or wrong answer. It's Prussia or Austria. And you all know what the right answer is, right? No.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Rod? Do you have a...
We're slightly an unusual studio in that we all know each other. We've all worked before, pretty much. But with designers, I like to design a game together with in a whiteboard over the course of an hour. And I collaborate with the designer, and it's really because when I know I'm going to be working closely with this colleague, I just want to make sure that I'm the right fit for her or him, and how we work together. And it's also really fun. It's surprising sometimes how the games that you make on the whiteboard end up somehow in the game, as a little feature or something. So we do that. I'm not really a big fan of programming tests. I've done way too many of them. I'm sick and tired of programming Elevator. I don't know if any engineers are in that room, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. No, I didn't do that one. Elevator, I get a lot of elevator questions. But besides that, I also like to talk about games. And usually my final question is, what games do you play and what games do you love? And I know that that's all, just about everybody I know at Paradox, that's kind of like our way of saying hello when we meet each other as well. What you been playing? What's your game? And it's also a great interview question because anybody who's a gamer, and all of us here are part of the tribe, if you can't answer that question, well, you're probably not such a good fit in a development studio. Now, obviously, there are different roles, but even so, in different roles, you're joining entertainment for a reason. You could certainly go and make more money at a different field. So we just shoot stuff about. We just talk about games.
Oh, shoot the stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Shoot stuff about games. Yeah.
How about you, Brenda? Any go-to questions?
Well, it's not so much a question, but what we do is it's not too hard to tick the boxes. This person can do these things. The temptation is when you find somebody who can tick all those boxes to go hired. But we do a special round of post-interview discussion in the office where we ask, why shouldn't we hire this person?
Okay.
Like, what did you pick up on that we shouldn't hire them? And it's been amazing to me on some occasions where the thing that you saw and you saw somehow will come together into, oh, maybe we shouldn't. And so it's easy to focus on why should we, but that why shouldn't we, you can miss some bullets that way.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to use some of these. So let me ask you then, Brenda. Do you have any war stories that you want to share?
I do. I've been in the end. That's all I've done. So I have the war stories that are just crazy, and the takeaway from those would be like, what? But the one that I still use almost every day, and this is a bit of lame audience participation. How many of you have a dirty dish in the sink at home?
Come again?
A dirty dish in your sink. It can be anything.
Yeah.
Coffee cup sitting to the side. Any of you? Okay. Now just imagine if I pulled all of you aside in a studio for an all-hands meeting and I berated you. What are you, a child? Do you need to come? Do you need to be told? Did your mother not teach you how to do dishes? And I pulled all of you. See, most of you, I can see some of your faces like, well, I hate you now. And so we had, in this one studio I was in, we had multiple all-hands-on meetings where people were berated because they didn't do dishes. Now, you might be a real neat freak, and you might go, well, good for them. But the end effect of it, and I've seen, there's been plenty of times in the kitchen where somebody's out there, they're planning to wash something, but somebody asked if they can do a code review or whatever. There's all kinds of stuff, but the takeaway was that these all-hands meetings to berate people ended up just making the team overall feel bad, right? Just there had to be other ways. And so whenever I go into the office, there will almost always be a coffee cup dirty in the sink. And I will always do that coffee cup. Always. I will always, and I know it sounds incredibly lame, but while I'm doing it, I'm reminding myself that I'm quite literally only as good as the team that I'm working with. I'm only as good as the team that's behind the game. And as much as we can say, people say, Brenda, where did you come up with the idea for Empire Over Sin? Well, I can tell you where I came up with it, but I can't describe the 1,000 times that the people I'm working with made it better. Mm. And if I decide to hold an all-hands meeting to berate them about something, instead of remembering that I'm only able to do what I'm doing because they're doing what they're doing, I will screw myself over.
So you don't passively aggressively then post on the Slack that I've washed somebody's cup, mug?
No, not at all.
That sounds very constructive. Do you guys have any similar stories of
Yeah.
all hands on?
I'm pretty sure everybody who's run a studio has got this. So I ran a unnamed studio, and it'll remain unnamed, as you'll see why soon. There's about 80 to 90 people. The facilities weren't what we would call OSHA compliant. Okay. It was a little bit hairy, and we had 4 bathrooms across 2 floors, mixed gender bathrooms. And I swear to you, we had a problem of the phantom peer. Of somebody just kept peeing on the floor, and it was in front of the bowl, or it was by the side of the bowl. And so in the all hands, as Brenda says, as GM, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm afraid I have to bring up an issue. We have a peer amongst us. The peer is around. This was the wrong thing to say. Huh. And so I was like, can we just be careful? The peeing continued. So then people start sending me emails of ways to trap the phantom peer. And it becomes this thing within Slack of people who sit near the bathrooms are watching who goes into the bathroom. And then if they go into the bathroom afterwards and there's no pee, they're trying to do this process of elimination of who's
it's like they're playing
peer.
Clue or something.
Yeah. And the
trying to webcam.
this was suggested.
That could be illegal.
I didn't even need to ask HR on that one, but yes, it was suggested to me of like, well, we could have a camera. I was like, no, we can't have a fucking camera in the bathroom. Thank you very much.
Good.
Then I got suggestions for the next all hands of like, I literally was telling people how to pee. I was like, well, maybe there are people, you know, we've got a lot of young engineers who don't know, or lung processors. One of my colleagues, who was a lady, was like, let me tell you, like, this could well be a lady because we have problems with hoverers.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who don't want to sit on the seat, and so there's hovering, so it could be a lady. So I'm going to give you instructions how a lady should pee, and maybe that will help.
Do we have an award
so
for best story?
literally,
Because
yeah,
this
I didn't know this either.
So wait, let me ask you, as a point of clarification. While you're making these instructions, I'm assuming laminated instructions that did they contain any kind of imagery or like a concept art?
Diagrams.
Facility? Stick
I wish
figures?
you'd been there. I wish now I should have done it right. No, I was
kept them, yeah.
So I was at all hands with nearly 100 people explaining how one pees. And how one should wash one's hand, and how it's polite to lift a seat or to wipe it after one's done. We never found out who the phantom peer was, but some folks did leave the company, and the phantom peer left. So I'm pretty sure the suspect was in there. So that was my.
It's a mystery of our lifetimes. We'll never know.
Yeah.
Speaking of like office friction, Shams, do you remember the great personal mug war?
Yes.
2010?
So we've had incidents at the Paradox office with personal mugs. I'm sure every studio has
or
this.
we used to have it very big.
We used to have it, but there used to be people used to bring their personal mugs and they disappear. And then sometimes the personal mugs, Andras is sitting there, our CFO, he remembers this. People pick up the wrong mug and take it to a meeting, and then somebody walks by and their home team mug is somebody else is like doing the lip thing, and it's just it became a big thing, and we had to kind of say like, hey, if you bring your personal mug to the office, and I'll admit I probably blew up. I didn't call for any hands-on meetings, but I probably upset one or two people who were like, that's my mug. I was like, no, it's not anymore. It's my mug.
Yeah. And then we basically decided that no more personal mugs, same mugs for everyone.
So we'll see. Brenda, you were reminded of a peeing story halfway through Rod's story. No, you said you have a good war story.
I do. Well, I do. It doesn't involve peeing.
No, okay. That was the cue. So maybe
I feel I lowered the tone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Oh no. That was the best story. I don't know that I have a vote, but
you
so
could
far
do
you got
both.
mine. I think the craziest thing that's happened for me is we were making a game for an unnamed company. And the game was post-beta, was about to go into launch when, from inside the company, we got a message from somebody I knew who was a game designer who said, can I meet you for lunch somewhere outside of town? And I thought,
out of town?
The intrigue. Yes, of course you can.
Yes.
So I go to meet this person, and they proceed to tell me a story that there's no way this is true, but I knew this person, and the story was this. They're taking your code, and they're making another game with it. When you submit a mission, they're changing the mission, they're changing the characters, because they think they can make another game to launch at the same time. So they said, when you guys come over, they're just turning around whiteboards and stuff. And I thought, there's no way this is happening. So I tell John, right? I'm like, and John's seen some pretty interesting things as well. And so he's like, seriously? So he contacts a coder he knows inside of there, and the coder said, yeah, it's happening.
What?
Yeah, so we went to the studio, and now we're just being mean because we know what's happening, and we have some pretty senior people with us. So we're making, actually it does have to do with the bathroom, but no phantom peeing. But so we start doing things like, if you're the whiteboard and we know we're supposed to go this way, we're going like, where's the bathroom, and heading that way, and we're watching people like, oh God, trying to hide this game from us. In the end, our game launched, and their shadow game, God knows what became of it, but they were really like, we actually got to see a build of it. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Trust issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess they were just they had their own little mod studio going on in the company or something.
Cool. We're going to move off of the kitchen and peeing topics soon, but I just want to share one of the craziest factoids I've heard in my, albeit shorter, game development career, is that the Harebrained offices have a fully functioning kitchen where people do cooking during lunch hour.
Wow.
Yes, and not like Ludafisk or anything. I mean, where's Connor? Are you here? Connor Monahan, one of our designers, cooks bread. Can you imagine what a game studio smells like when you got that fresh cooked bread and stuff like? A lot of people make pizzas. We've got a pizza tray and the whole bit. Yeah. Yeah. So, and by the way, our first studio we call the closet because it was a closet that we had rented, a storage closet from another game company. And the second studio that we were in, the president of WotC said to me, he called it the dump. So finally we get a place that's like, all right, we're putting in a kitchen, you know. And yeah, so we actually have toilets now and everything. It's really cool. So, to go back to that, because we had to use other people's toilets for a while. That was awesome. So, thanks for bringing it up, by the way.
I was at an AI and computer conversation startup for a year, and I was sat opposite an artist who loved a cocktail. And actually, the whole company loved cocktail. In fact, the whole company was revolved around alcohol, basically. But over time, I was like, that's interesting. And he'd started to decorate like the back of his the back of his desk with like Hawaiian like florals. I was like, oh, that's nice. This is feeling good. And then wood started to appear. And he was also a carpenter. And he assembled a fully functional tiki bar at his desk. And it wasn't like this big, like either. It was as wide as this couch and a fully stood. And he would, like, it was a full tiki bar. He put bar stools there. And yeah, that was the office that we were renting it from. The owner came around and he's like, the fuck is this? So, yeah.
Can I ask, did he have time to do actual game development?
He was actually very good. Very
good.
Yeah, he also ran a fashion design business. I wear one of his shirts. As well. Yeah, he was really good.
That's good.
Yeah. Neff, if you're watching, there you go.
Good. Anyone have any other anecdotal war stories? Anything that is influencing the work you're working on today? Something that, you know, reminds you constantly that this thing we're doing now, you really remember a recent learning or a recent war story. Rod, did you have anything?
Mine's super short. The reason I'm here is, and my son's in the audience, I won't embarrass him by calling him out, but the reason I'm here is 2 years ago, I was running a very, very successful mobile studio, and I was just crying in my soup to my wife in the kitchen of like, I'm not feeling satisfied, like, woe is me, right? Like, I get my dream job, and I'm like, I'm kind of in the mood for a change. And she was like, oh, well, you know, but we need to, plan, and obviously, security. And my son happened to walk in, and he was like, why don't you just write to a company that you want to work at? I think they'll take the call and see if they're interested. And I was like, what? That's not the way recruiting works, son. Like, there's positions are advertised. And he was like, well, what's the company you would really like to work at? And I was like, well, I love Paradox. Like, they're doing it the way I like to do it, which is, non-exploitative, and they treat their customers with intelligence, and they don't dumb down their games. And he was like, so, I don't know, do you know somebody? And so Troy, my good friend Troy, who runs the podcast Quarter to Three, 3 Moves Ahead, I emailed him. I was like, hey, because he's at Paradox. I was like, do you happen to have an in? I'd love to chat to Fred. And he introduced me to Fred, and Fred was like, yeah, this would kind of be good. So I'm here because of my son.
Cool. That's good. Thank you guys for your war stories. I'm going to share. Do you have one?
Yeah, I was thinking before about this kind of things that teach you about teams, and Mitch was talking about before how he was in a situation where people were leaving and everything, right? And like my low point was fairly early after I started. I worked back in, like, this was 2000 and I don't remember, 6, 8, 7, 4, 5, I don't know, somewhere. We had just released Diplomacy. And that project was a horror story, right? Lots of crunch. The game turned out not so good. People were really sort of like not feeling very well. We have a couple of people who had worked since before. The company was called Target Games before, and it compressed down to Paradox. And then you had a couple of holdouts who sort of like had been through that. And the mood was not very good, right? And I was also not very happy, right? I was tired, and diplomacy didn't turn out well. And it's like when you go to war. If you lose the war, you don't get the parade at the end. That's not very fun. Right. So we lost our lead programmer. The dev team was basically, 5 people. And then we lost one of the artists. And then we went on our summer holidays. And the thing was, during this holiday, I was going to move to a new apartment with my girlfriend, so I was busy moving. And as I'm carrying the couch, my phone calls. So I'm standing there with my cell phone in one hand and the couch in the other hand. And it's Johan, the creative director and studio manager, says that, the other programmer guy, your colleague, we were 2 programmers except Johan at that time. He's decided to resign. So now I have to ask you, are you also going to resign? And I would be lying if I hadn't said I considered it. But I was like, I kind of like my job anyway, and I just moved to a new apartment. I'm not going to, I'll give it another year. So I told Johan, it's like, I'm going to stay at least another year. And at the time, I thought he was just checking out to see which cards does he have to play. But afterwards, I learned that he actually had a job offer from another company. And he was like, if Thomas quits, then there's no point. Then I'm quitting too. And it kind of, there's a couple of things there. And one of the things that really gets to me to this day is sort of like, if I had answered differently then, all this, I don't know. I don't know.
Just sliding door.
It's kind of weird. And the other thing was that after I came back from holiday, right, the team was gutted. I mean, we lost our lead programmer. We lost the guy who started at the same time as me, who was probably a better programmer than me. But it was like everybody who was there had decided they wanted to be there. And it was a relief, right? We had too few people, we had too much to do. But the feeling was that we kind of reset the entire mood of the group. And that kind of feeling showed me a lot about sort of like how that matters when you go to work every day, even more so sometimes than exactly which competences you happen to have.
Good. Thanks for sharing. Okay, everyone. We're going to wrap it up. I want to say huge thanks to the panel. They'll be here at PDXCON the rest of the day. Ask them questions. They have more Phantom peer stories, probably. We definitely do at Paradox. I'm not going to share them, though. Yeah. But there are a few stories. So make sure you corner them and ask them what other dreams and hopes Thomas was thinking about pursuing before he went down the rabbit hole with Paradox. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We should leave now. I think our mics are off, too. Perfect.
Planetfall, world building for the future. Please welcome to the stage Lennart Sauce, co-founder of Triumph Studios and game director of Age of Wonders Planetfall.
Hello. Cool. World building for the future. So I'll have a little talk about how we ended up making a sci-fi interpretation of our game Age of Wonders. But let's start with a bit of a personal story. We've been making fantasy games for about 20 years. So for us, a lot was at stake. You know, whenever we tried something else, somehow it didn't come off the ground or it went spectacularly to shit. So it was about breaking that spell and trying something new. A little bit about the business case, like how, you know, everything starts with, you know, we're in business, a lot of money is being spent here. So we analyzed the market and we said there's going to be room for another planet-based 4X games. A lot of 4X games are space-based when they're set in the future, so we thought let's set one on a planet. Age of Wonders has always been a sort of war-focused game, so we thought it would be fun to match that with a sci-fi arsenal. We wanted to leverage our Teams XP and technology to be used in a game that's not too different from Age of Wonders. But of course there were some constraints. You know, the game is a war game, so it needs to the setting needs to allow for endless conflict. You don't want to have a setting that's not filled with war. It is a 4X game. That means you need to go somewhere. You need to transcend your people to a new level. And it had a fantasy root brand. That meant that we went for a sort of a mythological sci-fi world rather than a very hard sci-fi world. So then we had a basic framework. You know, there's a planet, and there's people fighting over a planet. You know, how hard can it be, right? So we needed to ask some questions. The 6 W's. This is a technique that journalists often use, and it can help you in the creative process. Basically, answering all these 6 questions allow you to basically construct a coherent backstory for your IP, for your game world. So who are these factions? What's their relation? Why are they fighting? How are they fighting? How are they different? When does this conflict start? Why does this all happen? What's their end goal? So this is the questions that we need to ask and answer. Then some general tricks about IP creation. We've made a couple. The Age of Wonders, which is a very classic fantasy IP. We made Overlord, which is basically a parody on classic fantasy. It was an action RPG, by the way, with lots of humor. But all of these things have basically been about making a mix between what is new, what is familiar, and what is novel and unique. You know, you don't want to make it too unique because people will get confused and lost, and they will use their will use the relevance with the topic. But you don't want to make it boring. We choose archetypes, you know, a lot of roles that you see in action movies or you see in games all come down to the sort of experience you had as a kid. Play as a pirate, play as a general, play as a nurse maybe. So we take these sort of archetypes and extrapolate them into this IP. We mix tropes and twist them around. You know, that's always fun. We had a lot of fun with that with Overlord. Everything is a remix. We like to create rule sets for IPs. You know, what would Superman be without kryptonite? Or, for example, the sorting hat in Harry Potter. Of course, standout imagery is important. Of course, you have Star Wars with its iconic helmets and ship designs. And maybe more importantly, it's important that any sort of work that you do in this sort of field has social relevance and currency. You know, with the historical games, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss about, like different nations' ambitions and history, and that's social currency. You talk about that. Soccer, football has social currency because you like to talk about it with your friends. So how do you add stuff that gets people talking? For Overlord, we took a very basic juvenile approach. That's basically fill the game with what the F moments. So whenever people saw, when you saw something in this game, people would talk about it because it was crazy or absurd. That's about social currency and relevance. When we started investigating sci-fi, coming from a fantasy background, this particular quote struck a chord. It was by Brian Aldiss, and sci-fi is basically hubris clobbered by nemesis. I mean, it's not true for all sci-fi, but for a lot of sci-fi. So we took that at heart, and we constructed a game world centered in the shattered remnants of a galactic empire called the Star Union. And basically, this galactic empire brought all of our problems, solved all of our problems. Because we had this huge universe now that spanned many thousands of worlds. All of our factions had a common origin. They had like common beef with each other. They knew each other from the past. You know, maybe they were blaming each other or what went wrong. There's lots of variety in the planets. It's not just a battle about one planet, but every mission is set on one of these many thousands of worlds, and each one could be a little bit different. You know, you could have feral worlds that were back in the outworlds. You could have imperial capitals and everything in between. There's a lot of mystery, you know, what happened there, sort of Fallout, but then on a galactic level, trying to piece together as to what happened in the Star Union. It allows for emergent storytelling, which Fallout, again, is very good at. You start to navigate the ruins, pick up different bits of information from the environment, and piece your story together. Also, the rise and collapse is very relevant to your own story. You know, what went wrong to that empire, and maybe it will happen to me too, because I'm trying to rebuild this empire. You know, what sort of threats are lurking there? What sort of mistakes were made? And it helps us differentiate in the marketplace. A lot of the other terrestrial sci-fi games are all about, you know, humans settling off on Earth and finding a new place to live. So this helped us differentiate. So here are some of these examples of origin stories. The TerraTech was the origin for the Amazons. These were bioengineers, terraformers. The Vanguard were the expeditionary forces of the empire. And as an example of one of the structures, we had the Elysium Parks, were a chain of Las Vegas-style entertainment complexes that were, you know, spread about multiple worlds, and you could encounter roaming entertainment bots that still, you know, wander the ruins. So we started to approach the development of this IP from two angles. That's how we generally do it. First, as the thematic direction. You approach it from the top to bottom, basically. This is all about the lore, the background, the premise, the marketing, the branding. And then there's the game mechanics. And these two things feed into each other. So it could very well be that we spend 2 weeks working on the lore of a particular faction, and then we pause it. We work on the mechanics, and something, you know, comes out of that. And then we feed that back into the lore and try to connect these two systems. And that creates a loop of creativity, and you have different people firing ideas at each other. And that's a fun, creative space to be in. Here are some examples. These are the Amazons that originate from the terraformers. The trope that we are addressing here is basically space elves, but we wanted to make them different space elves. So they're terraforming. We have biological augmentations. We have, you know, dino riding and laser damage channels. The twist is that we modeled them after female MMA fighters and sort of like predators. So we didn't want to make them like, you know, very feminine and very sort of tree-hugging. We don't want to do badass ladies. We wanted to deploy genetically modified dinos, which is fun. And they're more Monsanto than Greenpeace all around. And maybe most shockingly, to at least a part of the audience, is that they were female only. But, you know, it's up for the people to figure out why that actually happened. You know, maybe they will pick up some cues in the lore. The Keiko are another example. There's basically the trope of the insectoid space race, which we have all seen before. But we tell a little bit of an origin story. How did they get to be so nasty, like the Zerg or the Tyranids? So they're melee-focused, they're swarm race, and they use psionic and bioweapon groups. So as a couple of twists, we made them the victims of imperialism. You know, the humans came about, they broke their hive mind, and they turned them into slaves, basically. So when the empire fell, they had to choose a path of vengeance or reconciliation. And they seek to rebuild their broken hive mind. Then there are the secret technologies. This is basically the path forward. So the race is basically the looking back, their origin. And this is where the people are going. You know, your utopia might consists out of creating a sort of hybrid with an alien parasite. You see here like a little baby connected to this little ugly thing. You might want to burn the world and re-emerge from the ashes, forgive all the sins and start anew. You could start to play with space and time, or maybe elevate your mental well-being for your new utopia. Then there's style and tone. We could easily fill an entire presentation about how the art style came to be, but we wanted to differentiate from existing post-apocalyptic settings and fill everything with color. We basically had worked out a short description with the marketing team. So we said bravado and technicolor. That's basically the sort of attitude of the game. It's a war game. Like Jack is sort of represent the old age, very cocksure, just marching into battle, shoot first, ask question later. And then there is the colorful environments and creatures. So here we've answered the 6 W's or the 5 W's and the H, whatever you call it. So we've got survivors of a shattered galactic empire emerging from a cosmic dark age after the war storms subside. They claim remaining habitable worlds and bring about their vision of the future, using sci-fi arsenals and an empire building with competing transcendent technology. It's a mouthful, but those initial questions help you formulate your premise all around. So, where do we go from here? We have a universe that can be expanded into many different ways. First off, there are thousands of worlds in existence, so there might be many species lurking there that have evolved since the empire collapsed. Different mutants and whatnot, different locations that you can find. Then there is how does the universe preserve? How are they continuing to the future? What threats lie beyond the existing galaxy? And then, the universe of the Star Union was also thousands of years old, so what sort of threats lie in the past? And when expanding an IP, it's very important that you don't destroy the core values of your IP. For example, to take Fallout again as an example, you have a post-apocalyptic world. So if there is ever a storyline where the entire world gets rebuilt and everything becomes green again, you sort of destroy your IP, right? Because that was what makes Fallout Fallout. So you have to be very careful with what sort of elements you add to your IP, so it keeps evolving, but it also remains its uniqueness. So our first expansion is called Revelations. It's all about the past of the empire. So an ancient dynasty came back to be reawakened and claim its position again in this new world. And this is an example of how we take the past and bring it into the IP. So, as for a couple of lessons from our journey of taking this IP from fantasy, or basically very classic fantasy, I should say, to this future age, we found that as some of the challenges that one of the first comments we got when we opened the game up to the closed beta community was that they felt that the game was overwhelming, and a lot of fantasy or historical strategy games are easier to grasp because people are familiar with themes and concepts from history, or even for fantasy. A fireball is just a fireball, or a priest is a priest. It's fairly rudimentary. In sci-fi, we had like oscillating subatomic disgenerator or something like that. People are like, what does that do for me? What does it mean for me? So we spend a lot of time explaining and perfecting the words. So hopefully they're more accessible and tell the meaning. And it was also a lot more work to get people on board on particular directions for the game. Like classic fantasy is very trope heavy, more so than this. And you as a designer, as a director, you have to get people along into a particular idea, and that takes a lot of time. There are also many benefits to going to sci-fi. First off, it shows us the importance of telling something about the world of today. A lot of sci-fi does, of course, about the social problems. We deal with issues of fun stuff like mass employment, inequality, big omnipotent AIs using big data to control the masses and whatnot. That's all good, fun stuff, right? So we have found that sci-fi is more suited to a global audience. For example, this game was starting to get quite popular in Asia, which we didn't expect. Well, classic fantasy is very Western, European in that sense. It's also a good match with 4X mechanics because sci-fi goes somewhere, while fantasy is sort of stuck. So when you have a tech tree and you develop in a particular direction, of course you can keep researching new types of swords or maybe new types of spells, but you don't want to really break out of the medieval stuff too much. And Age of Wonders would sort of stop that sort of like steampunk stuff. And it also offers a lot more agencies to designers. There's more creative freedom for them to play with. So that's some of the conclusions from us. If you've got any questions, you can seek me out there in the Planful booth. And wish you a good show. Thank you. Hello? Huh? Yeah, I think so. How much did I end up?
뭐야 이거 노래 원래 이런 거야? 노래가 좀 이상한 거 같은데. 일단 일단 방송을 끄고 좀 이따 호의 방송할 때쯤에 다시 키도록 하겠습니다. 네, 좀 이따 호의 방송할 때쯤에 다시 키도록 할게요. 지금 보니까 가운데 딱히 재밌는 게임이 없어. 그러면 좀 이따 호의 방송을 할 때 뭐야 이거 노래가 이상한데? 호의 노래? 뭐지? 일부러 이렇게 트는 건가? 잠깐만 생방송 보면 알겠지. 지금 뭐 보는 사람 없으니까 좀 이따 다시 오도록 하겠습니다.